Chapter 883. The main door was instantly smashed by Qing Wan's brute force, creating a hole the size of a ball. The two servants who were hiding behind the door, eavesdropping and laughing, were immediately thrown out tragically, letting out two shrill screams. Qing Wan circled twice in the air before suddenly swooping down. Several sharp ice blades once again shot out from its mouth, ripping the two main doors apart on the spot, nailing them full of holes. The two broken door boards tottered for a moment before collapsing with a boom, unable to withstand the force. The people of the Qiao clan all rushed out from their respective rooms, hurriedly rushing towards the main door. They were simply dumbstruck, not expecting that there would be someone so daring in broad daylight, directly attacking their Qiao clan's main residence. What the fuck? Who exactly was it? They actually had the guts to do such a thing? A swarm of people rushed towards the entrance, dumbstruck as they looked in front of them. At this time, it was close to dusk. A wisp of the setting sun hung over the treetops, and a few gusts of cold wind brushed past. They saw a little girl wearing plain pink clothes, holding an enormous club that was half her height, standing at the Qiao estate's entrance, looking at them with an indifferent expression. In the depths of her vicious eyes, it seemed like a tiger or wolf was roaring. Have Qiao Dongwu come out? Arbor stared at the group of Qiao clan disciples who ran out, his voice indifferent as he spoke. What kind of person dares to rush to the Qiao estate's entrance and shout? Who do you think you are? If you have my grandfather come out to see you, he will. Qiao, and I only felt that her neck seemed to have been hooked by something. For a moment, she widened her eyes in fright, and before she could resist, she had already been swiftly pulled over. The brothers and sisters beside her tried to reach out to grab her, but how could they resist that huge force? Qiao and I instantly fell into an ice-cold little palm, her entire body trembling for no reason. Looking up, she just happened to look into the little girl's pair of frosty eyes that were filled with dense, cold intent. What kind of pitch-black, serene, and endless eyes were those? Qiao and I opened her mouth, but before she could speak, she felt a sudden pain on her cheek. The little girl had already given her a big slap in the face with lightning speed. Qiao and I, the young miss of the main family who gave her quite a bit of suffering in her previous life, Qiao Zhongda's extremely talented daughter. She remembered that when she was 9 years old, she had followed her father to the Qiao family's main residence. Since then, she had been living in a small, dilapidated courtyard outside the main residence. During this period of time, this Miss Qiao had often brought a group of young masters and young ladies to her house to flaunt her prowess. She had arrogantly ordered her to do all kinds of hard and tiring work, treating her like the lowest servant girl. At that time, she had never opened her profound, but she had never given up on herself. With the elegant title of the Qiao family's trash on her head, she was looked down upon by everyone in the Qiao family. Anyone could step up and step on her. She didn't expect to meet Qiao and I for the first time in this life. In her previous life, the seemingly unreachable Qiao and I was actually so weak that she could summon her with a wave of her hand. To be honest, there were many things that she didn't want to pursue. In particular, it wasn't the kind of great hatred that was as deep as a sea of blood. In fact, she couldn't be bothered to bother herself with some trivial daily conflicts, such as the trifling matter with Shou Tao in Quoto village. This was also in order to let go of that ice-cold and broken heart of hers. Those young masters and young ladies of the main family, like Qiao and I, were indeed hateful. During those dark days between the ages of 9 and 16, when she had yet to open her profound, who knew how much pain and suffering they had inflicted on her body and soul. Chapter 884. She could not care less about these things. She could treat those trials and hardships as the greatest test of her life. It was the polishing of her temperament and also the creation of her current life. Because, after all, those were matters from her previous life. In this life, these things simply never happened. She didn't want to cling to the past, but she ultimately couldn't walk out of her past attachment. For example, she simply couldn't walk out of the matter with Fan Xiuhe. So the moment they met, she simply couldn't control her impulsive heart and wanted to kill him on the spot. Yes, She wanted to kill Fan Qiuhe. She especially wanted to kill him at the banquet that day. She knew that her behavior at that time was especially like someone with a mental problem.
She was sick.
She herself was very clear that, strictly speaking, this could be a kind of psychological illness. It was as if these things clearly never happened in this life, but the moment she saw Qiao and I, her body actually reacted with pain. She felt that the little finger that Qiao and I broke in her previous life was currently twitching slightly. This was a kind of psychological torture. To tell the truth, after returning to the capital for so long, she simply didn't intend to have any relationship with the main Qiao family. It was fine to treat everything from her previous life as a passing cloud and smoke. Unfortunately, others might not let her off even if she thought this way. This was the current situation. If she lay dormant, others would bite her to death. If she wanted to live, she could only counterattack. Have Xiao Dongbo fucking come out. Xiao Mu repeated her words again, and she slightly tightened her grip on Xiao Ni's neck. It would truly be a pity if such a beautiful neck were to break. Miss, please stop. A young man walked out of the crowd. He looked to be around 25 or 26 years old. His appearance wasn't very good-looking and could only be considered decent. Arbor wasn't unfamiliar with this person at all. He was Qiao Chong, one of the top-ranked genius mystic cultivators in the main family. As a level 8 mystic cultivator, his talent was slightly inferior to his younger sister's. In her previous life, when Arbor was 9 years old, Qiao and I was already a level 4 mystic cultivator when she was a little over 11 years old. Therefore, Qiao and I was arrogant and complacent. Bearing the entire family's favor, she disliked this 9-year-old trash who hadn't even triggered her mystic meridians. And now, the 17-year-old Qiao and I was already a level 7 mystic cultivator. Everyone present, including Qiao Chong, felt their hearts tremble when a little girl grabbed a level 7 mystic cultivator's neck the moment they met. The little girl in front of him looked like she was only 14 or 15 years old. What kind of cultivation was this? She must already be a level 10 great mystic cultivator. The Qiao clan's disciples couldn't see through Arbor's cultivation at all. They could only see a huge blue divine bird circling above her head. Their minds were a little muddled for a moment. It was common knowledge that only level 10 and above mystic cultivators could form contracts with mystic beasts. This little lady was already a level 10 great mystic cultivator at such a young age. His talent was simply astonishing. Arbor carried Qiao and I effortlessly, as if he was carrying a hen, and strode into the Qiao residence. But she saw someone rush up to snatch Qiao and I from her hands. Arbor coldly curled her lips at that person and broke one of Qiao Ni's fingers with a snap. After this, Qiao Ni's entire body trembled as if she was soaked in cold water. 3 of her fingers had already been broken, and no one dared to come up to snatch Qiao and I from her hands. Chapter 885. Previously, Prince Emo had sent people to keep an eye on the Qiao family's main residence. The moment Xiao Dongbua and company made a move to kidnap Arbor's mother, the Hidden Night Pavilion knew about it. Therefore, when Arbor sent a message to the Hidden Night Pavilion, he received a quick reply saying that it was Xiao Dongbua who did it. However, before the Crown Prince could send people to rescue her, his Crown Princess had already knocked on their door. When Prince Emo received this news, he immediately jumped up from his seat. He didn't even bother with approving the memorials and directly tossed aside his cinnabar brush as he stood up, his face brimming with killing intent as he ordered, "Immediately summon Yu Xiao and bring 3,000 dragon saliva guards to the Qiao family's main residence." Hui Feng looked helpless. "You said that you would only go see the Crown Princess after taking care of matters. But can this be delayed?" "No, I have to go see Jojo immediately." He didn't want to delay a single minute. "You're bringing 3,000 dragon saliva guards to the Qiao estate to flatten the Qiao estate's main residence." Hui Feng rolled his eyes. "Don't worry. This subordinate dares to bet my head that our Crown Princess will definitely be fine. The unlucky one must be someone else. Hurry and make preparations." The Crown Prince roared at Hui Feng. The latter rubbed his nose and withdrew, feeling disinterested. Not long after, Yu Xiao, who received the news, personally led 3,000 dragon saliva guards to the palace's main entrance. When the Great King received the news, he initially thought that something serious had happened. For example, someone was plotting a rebellion in the capital to endanger his throne. After asking around, he found out that the crown prince wanted to bring his iron-blooded personal guards to the Qiao family's main residence to rescue the crown princess's mother. He was so angry that he immediately threw away an inkstone. Go, summon the crown princess to the main hall for this humble one. This humble one wants to have a good talk with her. This was his daughter-in-law's trivial matters. He couldn't keep letting his son interfere, right? What was a dignified crown prince who didn't attend to his proper duties and didn't think about national affairs, meddling in his daughter-in-law's family matters all day long? No wonder his old wife had been nagging at him recently, saying that the crown princess was a troublemaker who had led their good son astray. A father who loved his son dearly paced back and forth in the hall. He was determined to resist the fear in his heart. He was determined to find his daughter-in-law and have a good talk with her. Not long after, the manager eunuch, Gong Chang, ran in, panting, and knelt down on the ground. Reporting to the Great King, the crown princess went to the Qiao estate in the evening and smashed the main gate. She fought her way in to save her mother. What? The Great King's hand landed on the armrest, and he immediately felt the pain in his hand. He secretly rubbed his wrist. This crown princess is too much. She was the crown princess of a country. Why do you have no sense of propriety? What can't you send someone to do? Why did he have to personally come knocking on their door? Was this appropriate? Outrageous, outrageous, outrageous. Gong Chang this servant is here. Gong Chang wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He had a feeling that the Great King was going to trick him. Sure enough, the Great King angrily said, "Immediately go to the Qiao estate's main residence and bring the crown princess back for this humble one. Just say that this humble one is summoning her immediately. Go quickly." Yes, yes, Great King, this servant will go right away. Gong Chang's face was bitter as he submissively retreated. Then, he wished he could howl at the sky. Boo, why was it him again? During the New Year's banquet yesterday, he had clearly seen that the crown princess was a cold and independent person. How could she be moved by a servant like him? Chapter 886. He felt that he was asking for a beating by going to the Qiao estate's main residence to find the crown princess.
Why?
Gong Chang's face was mournful as he continuously tried to wipe the tears from the corners of his eyes and left. At the same time, Arbor lifted the pale-faced Qiao and I like a little chick and kicked over several Qiao family disciples along the way. He walked directly to Qiao Chong and impatiently said, "Go inform Qiao Dongbua and tell him to fucking come out and see me. Otherwise, I'll immediately snap her neck." The Qiao family can't afford to lose a genius, mystic cultivator. Qiao Chong's expression changed slightly, and he nodded and said, "I've already informed family head." At this time, a person hastily rushed over from the small path and casually saluted Arbor before haughtily raising his head. "Miss, family head invites you to the main hall."
Ah.
Qiao and I only felt that her neck was about to be snapped. Terror and fear flashed through her eyes, and she couldn't help but scream. She was really too scared. She felt that if she didn't do as the fiend in front of her said, her neck might be broken in the next moment. "Shameless. You still dare to put on airs in front of this lady. Tell him to come out and see me immediately. If he's a second late, I'll kill her." Arbor flew up and kicked the messenger boy's chest. That person rolled backward with a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth and a horrified expression. How could he still dare to put on airs? He hastily pissed his pants in terror and returned to report. At this time, Lightning and company had already gathered at the entrance. Following Qiao Ni's shout, they rushed in and stood behind Arbor with baleful expressions. Arbor's eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at the group of Qiao family disciples who were continuously retreating. "I'll count to 3. If Qiao Dongbua still doesn't show himself, I'll have her go to the Yellow Springs first and pave the way for you brats."
Ah.
Don't. Qiao and I shook her head in horror. She was truly scared, so scared that her body couldn't stop trembling. In the past 17 years, she had never felt so insignificant. It was as if that fiend woman could kill her with a single finger. 1. 2. Have mercy. Qiao Dongbua suddenly rushed over from afar, with the two brothers Qiao Zhongde and Qiao Zhonghao by his side. Behind them were Mu Boming, Qin Guilu, and the patriarchs of the Dou and Hong families. After that, Omega Kotoku slowly walked over. His deep gaze landed on Arbor. The two young masters of the Dou family, Mu Boming's son, and the others also quickly followed behind their father. Their gazes all landed on Arbor with some astonishment. Arbor's lips curved slightly as he mocked. Qiao Dongbua, you coward, so you've actually invited a lot of helpers. Qiao Dongbua's face instantly turned red. Qiao Zhongde said angrily, watch your tone. This is your granduncle. Arbor's scattering meteors flew out, directly hitting Qiao Zhongde's chest. The latter was immediately shocked, and at the same time he leaned back, the profound energy around his body had already protected his vitals. But with two pops, two small nails still pierced into his body, causing Qiao Zhongde to furrow his brows in pain as his entire body trembled. Arbor grabbed Qiao Ni's collar and fiercely struck the back of her head. His freaking strength made second Dou and the other's eyelids involuntarily twitch. Qiao Ni abruptly knelt down with a wretched cry. Arbor grabbed the back of her collar, and with a rip, Qiao Ni felt a chill in front of her chest. Her lapel had actually been torn open in front of everyone. This chapter is a gift. End of Chapter 7. I'm going to eat. Chapter 887. Arbor coldly stared at Qiao Dongbua and said, I want to see my mother. Otherwise, I'll hang her naked body at the city gate. Let's see if your old Qiao family still wants this old face.
You.
Qiao Zhongde was so angry that he leaned back, and he almost vomited blood from his throat. He had truly never seen such a ruthless little girl. How should he put it? She didn't even give people any time to react, and suddenly, the entire situation took a sharp turn to the point where it was irreversible. They were all old people, but they were actually led by the nose by a little girl with just a few words. Not to mention that Qiao Zhongde was angered to death. Qiao Dongbua was even more furious.
Arbor,
How dare you? Bang! Arbor's hand viciously chopped at the back of Qiao Ni's neck, and with another ripping sound, Qiao Ni screamed and cried. She only felt that the clothes on her upper body were almost completely torn apart by that savage girl. If you continue to consider, your genius granddaughter will be exposed naked in front of everyone. If you dare to make a move on Qiao Ni again, see how I'll use the same method to deal with your mother. Qiao Zhongde shouted. A sharp light flashed in Arbor's eyes. A dagger instantly appeared in her hand, and she cut off half of Qiao Ni's ear. Who dares to touch my mother? I'll let his entire family die without a burial ground. Qiao Dongbua, you coward. Prepare to let everyone in your Qiao estate wash their necks clean and wait. Die. Is this your fate? Arbor shouted sternly. Qing Wan, who felt her emotional fluctuations, screeched in the air and then spat out a mouthful of dense ice mist in the direction of Qiao Dongbua and the others. Qiao Dongbua was overwhelmed with shock, and he hurriedly grabbed his two sons and retreated. The stone floor beneath their feet was instantly covered by a layer of ice mist, and several cracks appeared. Dad, save me. Dad. Qiao Ni screamed shrilly as she lay half-sprawled on the ground, half of her face dripping with blood. Her half-naked body trembled uncontrollably, and she stretched out her hands to pull at the air in front of her. She screamed shrilly, Grandpa, save me, Grandpa. She's crazy. Save me, save. Xiao Mu picked up Qiao Ni's head and grabbed her hair that was as disheveled as withered grass. She then dragged Qiao Ni a few steps forward. Arbor pointed the bloody dagger at Qiao Dongbua and the others. Drawing a semicircle, he roared with a cold expression, I want to see my mother. Now. Everyone looked at her in shock. Perhaps they had never seen a young lady who could be so ruthless. Half of her face was splattered with Qiao Ni's blood, but her pair of clear, cold moon-like eyes emitted a terrifying light. Crown Princess, calm down. I can assure you that family head Xiao didn't make things difficult for your mother. Mu Boming hurriedly stretched out a hand and said, "Let go of Miss Xiao first, she." "Shut up. I didn't catch your mother. What kind of cynical remarks are you spouting?" Xiao Mu's bloody dagger was about to stab Xiao Ni's head again. Xiao Zhongde was so scared that his face was drained of all color. He jumped up in fear and trepidation. "Bring him. Hurry and bring him out," Xiao Dongbui said angrily with a purple face. "Why, you little bastard? Why you actually dared to be so heavy-handed to your clan sister? I am going to expunge your name from the clan." Arbor shot him a cold glance. Chapter 888. Then, she grabbed Xiao Ni's hair and turned around. Her pale face was stained with blood, but it couldn't hide her elegant and refined features. "Huh." Arbor sneered and looked at Xiao Dongbui mockingly. "Old thing. Do you think I care?" "Jojo." A weak call came from the corridor. Xiao Mu grabbed the bloodied Xiao and turned around. When she saw Wei Ziqin running over from the corridor, her eyes suddenly brightened. Lightning quickly led people to help Wei Ziqin and looked at the people around Wei Ziqin warily. "Jojo, it's Jojo. It really is Jojo." Arbor's gaze moved to Wei Ziqin's side. Looking at the familiar face, she couldn't help but be stunned. "Sixth aunt? A sixth uncle?" "Yes." Sixth Aunt Xiao and Sixth Uncle Xiao nodded and looked at her with a smile. Then, they looked uneasily at Xiao in her hands. Xiao Mu's gaze then shifted to a tall and frivolous woman beside the two people. "Your sister Xiaoya?" Arbor looked at Xiaoya and asked hesitantly. Xiaoya nodded at her and forced a smile on her cold face. "Jojo, long time no see." Wei Ziqin was brought to Arbor by Lightning and the others. Only then did Xiao Mu release her grip on Xiao and carelessly wipe her bloody hands on her skirt. She then tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mom, are you okay?" "Silly child. What could happen to mother?" Wei Ziqin looked at her daughter and couldn't help but feel sorry for her. "Then let's go." Arbor nodded. Father. Xiao crawled a few steps forward and crawled to Xiao Zhongde's side in a sorry state. "Kill her, kill this lunatic." Father. Arbor abruptly turned his head, and a ferocious glint flashed across his eyes. He stepped forward and stepped on Xiao. "Hey, Jojo. Xiao Lu's aunt hurriedly cried out and carefully soothed her emotions. "You should let Miss Xiao and I go. After all, we are all family members." Arbor sent Joni flying with a kick, and she landed in front of her father with a bang. Xiao Dongbui was so angry that his entire body trembled. "Arbor, from today onwards, your name is removed from the clan. You are no longer a member of the Qiao family." Qin Guilu knitted his brows. Wei Ziqin's body trembled. She turned around abruptly and roared, "Xiao Dongbui, what right do you have? How dare you?" They actually wanted to remove her daughter from the clan? How could a girl whose name was removed from the list still have a good reputation? Was he trying to force her young lady to die? "Look at what your girl has done."
"Bitch."
Xiao Zhongde roared angrily as he bent down to support his trembling daughter, Xiao. "Look at what she's done to Xiao. Bitch." Removed from the list. She should be removed from the list. Family head Xiao, you better think carefully before you act. Omega Kotoka glanced coldly at Xiao Dongbui, and the iciness in her eyes made Xiao Dongbui shudder involuntarily. Xiao Dongbui didn't sincerely want to remove Arbor from the list. He was eager to bring such a talented little evildoer back to the Qiao family. But now, he was quite enraged by Arbor's resolute attitude. Since he couldn't obtain such a talent, he would destroy this little girl at all costs. "Sir Qin, this is our Qiao estate's family matter. Please don't interfere," Xiao Dongbui said, and he turned to shout at Arbor. "Arbor, do you know your crime?" Chapter 889. "You know your old mother's crime, idiot." Arbor said indifferently, "Your Qiao family has already started to rot from the bones. You can take a look at the things you've raised and see for yourself what kind of good-for-nothing things you've raised. I wouldn't want such a rotten and disgusting family, even if you gave it to me." Arbor reached out to support his mother and coldly glanced back at them. "Why are you vermin the Chiao family's main family? Are you qualified? Look at your ugly faces. Each one of you thinks your faces are bigger than the sun. What a joke. My Arbor father and mother, from today onwards, will open their own family ancestral hall and write their own genealogy. They will break away from your rotten family. Xiao Zhongbong is the Chiao family's first family head. As for you, you're a bunch of little reptiles who are only fit to live in dark corners. You'll be like flies and dogs for your entire life, and in the end, you'll be replaced by the new Chiao family." Wei Ziqin's eyes widened slightly as she looked up at her daughter. Such a dazzling little girl, yet at this moment, her body seemed to be burning like a blazing sun. The color was so bright and translucent that it was almost impossible for everyone to look directly at her. Second Do's pupils constricted, and he subconsciously clenched his fingers tightly. Suddenly, Second Young Master Do felt his sleeves move, and he turned to look at his older brother. Seeing his older brother's slightly inquiring gaze, a sense of powerlessness surfaced in Second Do's heart in a split second. He was a smart person, so he could clearly feel eldest Miss Chiao's hostility toward the Do family. It was a terrifying thing to have such an enemy who was rapidly growing. Perhaps he should go back and sort out his thoughts. Then, he would find an opportunity to ask Miss Chiao how the Do family had offended her.
Child.
Wei Ziqin's eyes were dyed with a layer of moisture, and she reached out to gently pull her daughter into her embrace. "Let's go home, slut." Xiao Zhongde pointed at the backs of Wei Ziqin and her daughter as he angrily reprimanded, "Don't come back after leaving the Chiao family. You think being expelled from the family is a glorious thing? Soon, you'll experience how many people will ridicule you for being expelled from the family." Boom. The door of the Chiao estate, which was already in tatters, was completely smashed into pieces by the violent impact. 3,000 heavily armored dragon saliva guards quickly surrounded the entire Chiao residence under Yu Xiu's lead. The swarm of soldiers ran into the Chiao residence in unison, splitting into several groups and rushing into the front hall and back rooms in a well-trained manner, quickly taking control of the various forces. If anyone resists, they will be punished for the crime of disrespect and executed on the spot. A cold voice came from outside the house, filled with a murderous aura. Mo Lian's tall figure walked out of the broken door. He saw Jojo at first glance and hurried to Arbor's side.
Mo Lian.
It was only at this moment that Xiao Mu's taut nerves relaxed slightly. She also quickly ran over and was pulled into the man's embrace. "Jojo, are you okay?" Emolian saw that she was covered in blood, and his heart couldn't help but beat faster. He anxiously grabbed her small hand and looked her up and down. "I'm fine. It's all that idiot Xiao Mu's blood." It was only now that Xiao Mu looked up at him, feeling aggrieved. "Emolian, they captured my mother, yet I'm not allowed to retaliate?" Chapter 890. They said that I was cruel to Qiao and I, and removed my name from the Qiao family's genealogy. "I don't care," Arbor stubbornly says with red eyes. "I'll have my father build his own ancestral hall. In the future, I'll be the rightful eldest miss of the Qiao family. What do you say?"
Lian.
Arbor buries himself in her chest, making a muffled sound.
Good.
A trace of ruthlessness flits through Mo Lian's eyes. She looks up at Xiao Donghua and the others and roars, "Where are the crown prince's personal attendants?" Xiao Mu leaned against his side and reached out to hug his waist, nuzzling her small head into his embrace. She could clearly feel the man's breathing quickening. That was the blood that was burning due to his anger gradually heating up.
Boom.
Over 100 personal attendants stepped forward, raising the sabers in their hands and shouting in unison, "Present." The capital's Qiao family has arrested the Marchioness for no reason. They have committed a great crime of disrespect to the crown princess. Everyone in the capital's Qiao family is to be detained. Wait for the Supreme Court's approval.
What?
Xiao Donghua's entire body trembles. Just as he's about to resist, He hears the crown prince's icy voice ring out. If there's resistance, regardless of gender or age, kill them on the spot. The Qiao family's children immediately cry out. Xiao Dongbu's shoulders instantly slump, his hands loosening as a guard presses a set of mystic energy shackles on him. His eyes are red as he says angrily, "Your Highness, you can't do this. Your Highness. If you don't want the Qiao families close to 300 people to all die, then shut up for us." Mo Lian coldly sweeps a glance at Xiao Dongbu, leaving behind a sentence that makes everyone in the Qiao family tremble in fear. "You're already no longer us wife's clansmen. There's no need for us to be polite to you." Xiao Zhongde immediately goes limp on the ground. His previous clamoring and cursing all seemed so petty and laughable. A tiny Qiao family wanting to oppose the powerful imperial court is undoubtedly like striking a rock with an egg. They'll die without an intact corpse. In a split second, the sounds of people being arrested, berated, and beaten mixed together. "I only want Mom to live a bit more comfortably," Xiao Mu said dryly as she snuggled up to Mo Lian in low spirits. "Don't worry, they won't have the chance to do anything to Mother." Mo Lian sent the mother and daughter back to the Marquis of Jiyuan's estate. Wei Ziqin and her daughter were whispering in the car. When I first saw Qiao Laolu and sister-in-law, I was also shocked. Wei Ziqin held her daughter's small hand and told her in detail what happened after she was kidnapped to the Qiao family. "Xiao Dongbu didn't make things difficult for me. I even asked the doctor to treat my wounds." Wei Ziqin shook her head and said, "He probably didn't even think that you would have such a huge reaction and almost overturn the entire Qiao estate. They said that they wanted me to stay with the main family for a period of time. So they specifically asked Six's sister-in-law to accompany me. When I saw Laolu and sister-in-law's family, I was genuinely happy. Sigh, but I didn't expect that the two of them were helping Qiao Dongbu persuade me to stay. They even wanted me to persuade you to return to the main family." Wei Ziqin shook her head, not knowing what to say. After all, so many years had passed, and people's hearts were fickle. It wasn't strange that Laolu and Six's sister-in-law had changed because of the ways of the world. Previously, she had asked the husband and wife how they had survived all these years and how they had come to the main family. The two of them were silent and didn't intend to tell her at all. Wei Ziqin saw that the two of them had grown distant with her and didn't treat her as one of their own, so she didn't ask anymore. Chapter 891. Xiaoya used to be a child who loved to smile, but now, she was abnormally cold when they met. Wei Ziqin felt that even her smile toward her was a bit forced. After all, they were old neighbors of Quoto village. Seeing them become so unfamiliar, Wei Ziqin didn't feel very good. "Mom, don't think so much." Arbor was rather open-minded as she held her mother's hand and said, "There are some changes that we can't stop no matter what." Wei Ziqin wiped the corners of her eyes and nodded. She was just a bit regretful. A mother and daughter returned to the Marquis of Jiyuan's estate under Prince Mo's escort. Just as they got off the carriage, they were stopped by a series of loud shouts. Wei Ziqin and Arbor paused and turned to look. They saw the great king's steward eunuch, Gong Chang, and striding over to them on his short, chubby legs. This old servant greets the crown prince and crown princess. "Marchioness." Gong Chang, and wiped his sweat and panted heavily. Only the heavens knew that he had rushed to the Qiao estate's main residence to deliver the great king's verbal edict to the crown princess, only to end up empty-handed. Afterwards, he could only bitterly rush back to the Marquis of Jiyuan's estate, and only then did he manage to intercept the crown princess. Mo Lian glanced at him coldly. "What are you doing here?" Gong Chang and was a shrewd old man. The moment he heard the crown prince's clearly displeased tone, he knew that things were going to be bad. However, he was burdened with the damned mission that the great king had given him, so he had no choice but to brace himself and face the crown prince. He said obsequiously, Your Highness, this old servant is here on the great king's orders. He urgently summons the crown princess to the palace for an audience." Urgently summons? How urgent did it have to be to make Gong Chang, and this old fellow, sweat profusely? Prince Emo coolly swept the old eunuch a glance. What's the matter? What's the hurry?
Tomorrow.
Jojo needs to go back and rest. Gong Chong, and immediately knelt on the ground with a plop. Your Highness. The great king is urgently summoning the crown princess. This matter cannot be delayed. If this old servant fails to bring the crown princess back to the palace, whoa. This old man actually cried as he wiped his face with tears streaming down his face. Crown Prince Emo pursed his lips tightly, his expression displeased. Arbor didn't care. He tugged at Emo Lien's sleeve and said, Forget it. Don't make things difficult for him. It won't take long for me to follow him into the palace. While they were talking, Father Chiao, who had gone to the capital office to report the case, happened to return. Accompanying him was the capital governor. The two hurriedly dismounted and went forward to greet the crown prince. When Lord Peng saw that Wei Ziqin was safe and sound, he immediately heaved a sigh of relief and repeatedly congratulated her. Lord Peng, the suspects have all been taken into custody by the Supreme Court. I'll need you to follow up on this matter. Emo Lien instructed indifferently. Of course. Don't worry, Your Highness. Arbor comforted his mother with a few words and had his parents return home first. He followed the crown prince into the palace. On the way, Emo Lien's brows were tightly knitted. Seeing this, the little fellow couldn't help but frown as well. She reached out to stroke his brows. Emo Lien snapped out of his daze and saw her adorable action. He couldn't help but chuckle and hold her little hand. You really don't want me to go with you? No need. Arbor twisted his little hand and reached out 2 fingers, one on the left and one on the right, to smooth out the frown between his brows. Emo Lien burst into laughter. Arbor tilted his head and suddenly asked, Emo Lien, can your father take a beating? Gong Chong, who was sitting on the shaft of a carriage, didn't know why he heard the crown princess's words, but his heart froze for no reason. Chapter 892. The crown princess has arrived. The great King Emole, who was pacing back and forth in front of the main hall, suddenly perked up. He straightened his posture and turned around with a cold expression. Arbor greets the great king. Arbor walked into the spacious main hall without consulting anyone and performed a standard salute in the great king's direction. Emole's lips curled into a smile as he stared sharply at the girl in front of him. He suddenly asked, Crown Princess, do you know why we summoned you here so urgently? Arbor looked up and returned the great king's gaze with neither servility nor arrogance. She just stood there quietly and didn't say anything, only waiting for the great king to continue speaking. Emole simply had nowhere to vent his anger. As expected, his old wife's nagging wasn't wrong. Facing this expressionless stoic face, he didn't know why his mood started to sour. Do you know that back then, it was the crown prince who begged us and knelt for 3 days and 3 nights without getting up? Only then did us obtain the position of crown princess for you. Otherwise, with your status, there's no way you can become the crown princess. Arbor directly swept a glance at the great king. What are you bragging about? Would Emolien do such a cowardly thing? He should be the one who took the written imperial edict and asked you to directly knock it on the table. The great king was so angry that he was jumping up and down. Nonsense. He was already about to explode from anger on the inside. This son of his was indeed a swindler. He actually said everything to his wife. He made his father lose face in front of his daughter-in-law. Isn't that so? Darling Xiao was angry and said whatever was on her mind. That night, he told me himself that I'm already an adult. We have to settle the marriage before the coming-of-age ceremony. Marriage isn't scary. It's just a formality. In the future, we'll be husband and wife. The great king's eyes bulged. Was this how his son tricked a little girl? What formality? Marriage is just a formality, haha. Then, that night, he entered the palace to ask you for the imperial edict. The more darling Xiao spoke, the angrier she became. She glared at the great king and said, You big liar. He even said that he would kneel for 3 days and 3 nights. He hadn't even been in the palace for 2 hours when the imperial edict came down. Don't you remember what you've done? The old great king really couldn't remember. But it was really embarrassing to be exposed by her daughter-in-law like this. Furthermore, what liar! He was the great king. Preposterous. I summoned you here today to tell you. The old great king flung his sleeves angrily and said, "It's not easy for you to get the status of crown princess. You should cherish it. Look at all the trouble you've caused recently. Even the crown prince's reputation has been tarnished by you." Gong Chang'an followed behind the great king and carefully reached out to tug at the great king's sleeve, indicating for the great king to look at the crown princess's darkened expression. Although our Seacom planet's folkways are more ferocious, but as the crown princess, you must uphold your morals and scrupulously abide by a woman's duty. You mustn't easily get into a fight with others over trivial matters. Now, you even went so far as to destroy your own family. You have to trouble the crown prince to step forward and resolve your troubles every time. Crown princess, I'm warning you seriously. If there's a next time and you damage the crown prince's reputation, I'll definitely. Smack. Suddenly, a blue immobilization talisman was abruptly stuck to the great king's forehead, instantly causing a certain someone's gesticulating hand to freeze in midair. The great king's face was petrified. Chapter 893. Your Highness, Your Highness, Your Highness the Crown Prince, it's bad. The junior eunuch sent by Gong Chang and ran into the Eastern Palace in a panic and looked around the empty palace. The junior royal maid from the Eastern Palace followed in and said with a fierce expression, "I already said that His Highness isn't in the bedchamber. How dare you barge in here? Where did His Highness go?" The junior eunuch was about to cry. This servant was sent by Manager Gong. This servant earnestly requests that His Highness make a trip to the king's palace. The junior royal maid pursed her lips. How can we, as servants, care where the master goes? You can just report the truth to Manager Gong. The junior eunuch said with a sullen expression, "This servant has an extremely urgent matter to report to His Highness. The great king is still waiting for His Highness to return and rescue him." What happened to the great king? Hui Feng couldn't pretend that he didn't hear anything anymore, so he appeared next to the junior eunuch and asked with an indifferent expression.
Wah.
The junior eunuch wiped his tears and said, "The great king has been immobilized in the main hall by Her Highness the Crown Princess with an immobilization talisman. Even now, he still can't move." It was almost dusk, and it was almost time to light the lanterns for dinner, but the great king was still immobilized in the main hall in the same posture. Only now did the great king himself start to panic. Gong Chang and quickly ordered someone to invite His Highness the Crown Prince to resolve this urgent matter. At this moment, the Crown Prince was hiding in the bedchamber's secret room and crafting a golem by hand. Combined with some guidance from the Tianji treasure blueprint, the Crown Prince's improved golem was more agile and nimble than before. Moreover, this golem could already start learning some simple mystic techniques and was about the level of a normal level 4 or level 5 mystic cultivator. This was a great leap in golem crafting. If he wanted to create a golem above level 10 mystic cultivator, he still needed to study it continuously. When Prince Mo heard Huifeng's report, he buried himself in his work and didn't even look up. "I didn't hit him. I only stuck an immobilization talisman on him. He'll be able to move when the time is up, so what's the rush?" Huifeng's mouth twitched as he silently lit a candle for the old great king in his heart. Look at this troublesome son of his. How biased was his heart. He had long known that the great king would definitely come to his eastern palace to ask for reinforcements, so he had entered the secret chamber early in the morning to slack off. "Your Highness, do you think we should go to the king's palace to express our sincerity?" The crown prince aloofly glanced at Hui Feng. Jojo merely stuck an immobilization talisman on him. "I think it's just right to give him a basin of ice water to cool down." This great king had nothing better to do, so he kept bothering his wife. "I won't read the memorials for the next 2 days. Send them to the great king." The crown prince snorted. "I think he has too much free time." An hour later, Hui Feng brought back the latest news from the king's palace. The crown princess ordered servants to set up a small table and started eating dinner in front of the petrified great king. Mo Lian's slender hands abruptly paused in the middle of fiddling with the golem, but she then continued working as if nothing had happened. When fourth Princess Mo Shuang arrived, she saw this scene. The woman known as the Crown Prince Consort was eating slowly in front of the king, who was standing stiffly in front of him. Royal father. Royal father. Mo Shuang made a big fuss as she walked forward. She first hugged the great king's leg and wailed bitterly, as if the great king had died. The old great king's expression looked as if he had eaten shit. If he could move right now, he would probably kick this daughter out of the hall. After Mo Shuang finished crying, she abruptly turned around and glared viciously at Arbor. Chapter 894. How dare you use witchcraft to harm the great king? Guards, guards. Gong Chong, and hastily walked up with a long face and hastily waved his hand. Fourth princess, don't cause trouble here. Hurry and return first. Fourth Princess Mo Shuang was enraged. Gong Chong, and how dare you chase this princess out? Gong Chong, and really wanted to cry. He was clearly protecting his master loyally and doing all of this for the princess's sake. How could the princess be a match for the crown princess with such a dumb brain? You still dare to make a fuss here? The crown princess will teach you a lesson in a bit. Fourth Princess Mo Shuang walked to Arbor's table with a dark expression. She stretched out her leg and looked like she was about to kick over her small table, but Arbor pressed down with one hand and firmly gripped the table. You. Mo Shuang was enraged, but she couldn't resist Arbor's heavy pressure. She loosened her grip and staggered back a few steps, her eyes bulging as she cursed, as expected of a bold woman. She dares to be so impudent in the great king's palace. Gong Chong and walked to the fourth princess with a bitter expression. Princess, you had better return first. No, I have something important to report to royal father. Mo Shuang grabbed Gong Chong and's collar and angrily said, Hurry and have this woman dispel the witchcraft for the great king. Gong Chong and's expression became even more bitter. Your Highness, are you joking? Her Highness the Crown Princess even dares to discipline the great king, let alone a lowly servant like me. What use would I be if I went up? Wouldn't I be sending a lamb to the tiger's den? Mo Shuang turned her head and glared at Arbor, but she couldn't do anything about it. Seeing this crown princess leisurely eating without even looking up, Mo Shuang felt a bit stifled. She was clearly the princess of the golden branch and jade leaves, all right. Why could this crown princess be so much more unscrupulous than her, a princess? Another incense stick of time passed. The corner of Huifeng's mouth twitched as he ran back and reported the latest battle situation to His Highness the Crown Prince. The great king can finally move. He just called the secret guards to arrest the crown princess and interrogate her. Unexpectedly, the crown princess flicked her sleeve and took out handfuls of blue body immobilization talismans. She whispered to the great king, Great king, here are 100 bodies securing talismans. One talisman will secure you for 2 hours. How many days do you think you will have to eat dirt in this hall if I use them on you? Emolian was stunned for a moment before laughing out loud. This was indeed something that his Jojo would do. What happened next? The great king sent the steward eunuch, Gong Chang'an, to respectfully escort the crown princess out of the palace. It's said that when Gong Chang'an left, he ran faster than a rabbit, practically sending off the crown princess as if he was sending off the god of plague. Huifeng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That was true. He summoned the crown princess to the king's palace in all seriousness for a lecture, but the great king was inexplicably punished to stand for 2 hours. In any case, the great king must be feeling very tired right now, right? Mo Lian walked out of the secret room with a hearty laugh and was full of praises. I'm relieved that Jojo didn't suffer any losses. Here, I'll go see royal father right now. Crown prince, can you be any more deceitful? Huifeng looked up at the sky speechlessly. Your Highness, I think it's best if you don't go over right now. The Great King is currently in a terrible rage and reprimanding the fourth princess. Why did she enter the palace? Prince Mo's brows involuntarily creased at the mention of fourth sister Mo Shuang. The fourth princess entered the palace to beg for a consort.
What?
Crown Prince Mo momentarily thought that he had misheard. Wait, I haven't finished yet. It's not early today. Chapter 895. The fourth princess came to the palace to beg for a prince consort. Hui Feng rolled his eyes and repeated his words. Beg for what prince consort? Mo Lian frowned and paused in her steps. This Mo Shuang married the Marquis of Su, Anne's estate's old third 7 years ago, but she was unwilling to be left alone after the marriage. She brought a gigolo home every few days and quarreled with the prince consort all day long, which ultimately led to a peaceful divorce. In the end, she refused to let the prince consort off and forced him to his death. Her conduct was simply shameless. Mo Lian disdained to speak with her, so she didn't pay much attention to this woman's affairs. Hui Feng grinned, as if he had heard an interesting piece of news. He cheerfully said to Mo Lian, the fourth princess begged the Great King to bestow the Qin estate's eldest young master to her as her prince consort. The Great King rained down a torrent of abuse on the fourth princess. Haha. Who? Mo Lian truly thought that she was hearing things. Who was his crippled idiot fourth sister, who didn't have a trace of mystic energy and couldn't lift a single thing. Thinking about. Cough. This subordinate also knows that it's rather inconceivable. But the princess claimed that she was immediately stunned by eldest young Master Qin after seeing him at the New Year's banquet 2 days ago. After missing him for 2 days, she couldn't bear the loneliness and ran into the palace to beg the Great King to bestow a marriage upon her. Ha 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 ha. Mo Lian actually laughed maniacally. When Hui Feng saw that such a trivial matter had actually amused his master, he was immediately amused as well. He simply leaned forward and vividly described what he had seen and heard in the king's palace. Your Highness, you don't know. The fourth princess hugged the Great King's leg and was dragged by the Great King to wipe the floor, but she refused to let go. She cried and yelled that she had to have the Great King bestow a marriage upon her and bestow the Qin estate's eldest young master to her as her prince consort.
She even said, cough.
If this daughter can't marry Mr. Qin and receive his nourishment, this daughter will definitely wither and wither like winter vegetation. This daughter will die. Hui Feng stifled the anger in his throat as he shouted this. Mo Lian was startled for a moment before she started laughing maniacally. In the dead of the night, the moon hung above the trees. In Crane Garden, when Second Qin heard the messenger's report, he curled his lips into a rare mischievous smile. That's great. That's good. Then perhaps I'll have a princess sister-in-law in the future. Who told him to flirt with flirtatiousness? Look. Who did he flirt? What was my eldest brother's reaction? The man was about 27 or 28 years old and had an honest look on his face. He respectfully lowered his head and said, Eldest young master didn't have much of a reaction when he heard the news. He was just stunned for a moment before he smiled and said that there was no need to worry about it. On the other hand, Miss Ping, from eldest young master's court, was very angry. She cursed at fourth princess behind closed doors and even smashed quite a few things. Omega Kotoku pursed her lips and nodded absent-mindedly. Wang Chung, have you done what I asked you to do? Reporting to master, Wang Chung has done it. Omega Kotoku nodded slowly. She gripped her cup and icily said, If it's mine, then it definitely can't escape. Wang Chung stole a glance at his master. He felt like his master's dark and serene eyes seemed to flicker with the water of a frigid pond, as sharp and piercing as an icy precipice. Wang Chung didn't dare to look any longer, and quickly lowered his head. Omega Kotoku waved her hand at him, and Wang Chung silently disappeared. That night, Blue Mountain Courtyard's maidservant Xiang Yuan was feverish and muddle-headed from the fever, alarming manager Kai Wei. Chapter 896. After Arbor returned home safe and sound, She first reported to her parents before washing up and going to bed. She felt exhausted from today's torment, so she fell asleep the moment she laid down on the bed. Early the next morning, Arbor was informed of Duanyu's visit as soon as she got up. Duanyu, this guy, must have come because of yesterday's incident. Arbor wiped her face, changed into a set of clothes, and ran to the main hall to see him. As soon as she entered, she saw that guy pacing back and forth in the hall with his hands behind his back. Duanyu, Arbor called out softly in a crisp voice. The young man turned around, and the moment he saw her, his pair of peach blossom eyes suddenly lit up. Jojo, are you all right? Did you get hurt? Duanyu looked at her anxiously and asked, I heard that you were summoned into the palace by the old great king after returning yesterday. What did he do to you? Reprimanded? Punished?
Of course it's fine.
Arbor pursed her lips. When she recalled the great king's sullen expression yesterday, she wanted to laugh on the inside. Mo Lian's father was just a bit lustful, muddle-headed, and lazy, but there was nothing else. She was just playing a harmless joke on the old man, so she didn't know how traumatized the old man was. I just knew that Jojo would be fine, Duanyu said happily. Duanyu cheerfully exclaimed as he reached out to grab her sleeve. Oh, you. Why did you barge into the Qiao family's residence by yourself? You should have at least dragged me along. I can also join in the fun, right? Arbor nodded. All right then, I'll call you if there's a fight next time. That's right. Duanyu nodded with a grin. Jojo, do you have any activities for the Lantern Festival? I heard there will be a Lantern Festival that day, so let's go together. Lantern viewing. Arbor was dispirited. MHM, apparently there's no curfew that night. We can play until very late. Duanyu looked at her with blinking eyes. It's very fun. There will be people weaving in and out, praying and releasing lanterns, and all kinds of activities. How about we go and have some fun together? Yay! 2 cheers suddenly sounded. Sister, let's go play. Jolin and Jonathan suddenly popped out of the door and ran excitedly to Arbor. The little monk followed behind them and looked at Arbor with sparkling eyes. Benefactress, is the Lantern Festival that fun? When he used to live in a temple, he would only celebrate festivals with his teacher and father. He had never seen a Lantern Festival before. He had never seen such a lively and bustling scene. Arbor waved at the small monk. The little monk pattered over to her and raised his little head to look at her. Benefactress? Kong, you really want to go? The little monk tilted his head and thought for a while. In the end, he nodded heavily and said, I want to go. Master had said that monks should not lie. Yes, he was an honest man. Arbor patted Kong's head. All right, let's go together. All right. Duanyu's mouth twitched. He didn't expect to have to drag along 3 little radishes. Jojo, 10 days after the Lantern Festival, the 8 great patrician families will hold a competition between disciples below the age of 20 and above the age of 13. Can you come and watch the competition then? Arbor turned to look at Duanyu. I will participate in the competition. The Qiao family that represented the new generation. Duanyu immediately jumped up in excitement. Really? Then, you must properly beat up those little monkeys from the Duan family for me. Ha 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 ha. Chapter 897. The two were chatting animatedly when Chunying hurried over with 2 maidservants. She curtsied when she saw Arbor and Duanyu. Miss, young Master Duan, is something the matter? If it wasn't, Chunying wouldn't purposely interrupt her conversation with Duanyu.
Yes.
Apologies, miss. There's someone outside who claims to be the Marquis of Su and's estate's 5th young master, Hu Yukong. He's been clamoring for Miss to compensate for the medicinal soup and insists on staying in our estate, saying he wants Miss to personally tend to his injuries. Our people chased him away twice, but he refused to leave. At this time, he's already attracted a lot of onlookers. This servant didn't handle it properly and had no choice but to come and inform Miss, Chunying said apologetically. Duanyu clenched his fists when he heard this. Hu Yukong, is it? This young master will go and meet him. I'll pay him for the medicine and serve him the medicine. Arbor couldn't help but find it funny and tugged at his belt. It's nothing. It's just a person with a bad brain that I met yesterday. I'll go out and take a look. I'll go too. Duanyu was afraid that Arbor would be taken advantage of, so he quickly followed. Xiao Lin and Xiao Sun exchanged glances before quickly running out with the little monk.
Who was it?
Did they eat a bear's heart or a leopard's gall to come find trouble with their eldest sister? Didn't they know that their eldest sister was someone who could even backstab the Great King? From sister's words, it seems like it's someone we met at Spring Dawn Garden yesterday. Xiao Lin blinked.
Wow.
It can't be that fool whose head was smashed by sister with a flower pot, right? Xiao Sun suddenly exclaimed. When Duanyu heard this, he knew that there must be some marvelous story behind it. He quickly took out melon seeds, peanuts, and candies from his inner world and peddled them to the two brats to inquire about yesterday's events. After the Xiaolin siblings each grabbed a handful of melon seeds and peanuts, they couldn't close their small mouths and poured out yesterday's events to Duanyu. Arbor didn't care about what those people were muttering behind her. She directly walked to the door, and as soon as she walked out of the Marquis of Jiyuan's estate, she saw that oddball old fifth of the Marquis of Su's estate rolling on the ground as he stubbornly held onto the heels of her father, Qiao Zhongbang. Qiao Zhongbang had an awkward expression on his face. He didn't know whether he should kick him flying with his heel or continue dragging him forward. What are you doing? Arbor looked at Hu Yukong speechlessly. When the latter saw her, his eyes quickly lit up. Then, he pointed at his own head and wailed, "Look at my head. It was smashed by you yesterday. The doctor said that something might go wrong. I don't care. You have to be responsible for my treatment. Otherwise, I'll just lie in front of your Marquis of Jiyuan's estate." Arbor gazed deeply at him. That gaze caused Hu Yukong to involuntarily shrink back, feeling somewhat guilty for no reason. Oh, she smashed his head with a flower pot yesterday, and now he's shamelessly sticking to her door. Duanyu rolled up his sleeves and was about to step forward. I think that doctor was right. It's not that something might go wrong, but that something is wrong with you right now. What could go wrong with me? Hu Yukong was paralyzed on the ground as he swept a disdainful gaze at Duanyu. Something wrong with your head. Come.
I'll treat you.
Duanyu was about to step forward as he spoke. Hu Yukong rolled on the ground and hugged Qiao Zhongbang's heels as he wailed, Marquis murder? Marquis, someone wants to kill someone." Qiao Zhongbang restrained himself and abruptly used a bit of force to pull out his feet. Chapter 898. Stop making a fuss. Arbor shouted impatiently and waved her small hand at the two boy servants behind her. Help him up. Yes, Mississippi. The two servants quickly went up to support him. However, Hu Yukong refused to let go of Qiao Zhongbang's heel and even howled. What are you doing? Don't touch me. I said don't touch me. Damn it, a bunch of lowly servants. How dare you touch your lord who? Lord Marquis, save me, Lord Marquis. Qiao Zhongbang was truly embarrassed to death. Sorry to trouble this young master who, can you not embarrass yourself in front of the Marquis of Jiyuan's estate? If he was this young master whose father, he would probably want to tear him apart. How did the Hu family produce such an oddball son? Scram. Qiao Zhongbang sincerely forced this word out from between his teeth. How could he have known that he would be so unlucky? He was just about to head to the capital governor's office, but this oddball would pester him as soon as he stepped out of the gates. I don't care. You must compensate. Hu Yukong argued forcefully. You smashed my head. You must compensate me for my medical expenses and serve me wholeheartedly until I recover. Arbor suddenly smiled at him. This smile made Duanyu's hair stand on end. What was going on? Why did his Jojo keep giggling foolishly at strange men? There was something wrong with this situation. Jojo, you aren't really going to take in this mentally ill guy, right? Duanyu grabbed her small hand and earnestly dissuaded her. You mustn't. Look at how shameless he is. He clearly wants to cling to you. We don't even know what his motive is, so you mustn't bother with him. You'll lose if you nag at him. You're right. Arbor turned and nodded seriously at Duanyu. After Duanyu heaved a sigh of relief, He glanced over and saw the little girl leaping down the steps. She ran directly to Hu Yukong and yanked him down from her father's heels. Xiao Zhongbang let out a long sigh and hurriedly took a few steps back. He then looked at Hu Yukong suspiciously. This kid looks like a weakling? But just now, when he used all his strength to pull his heel, he actually couldn't pull it out? Miss Xiao, the cost of the medicine cannot be reduced by a single cent. Hu Yukong was pulled over by her, and he grumbled. What the hell are you talking about? Arbor slapped Hu Yukong's big head. Everyone's mouths twitched, and he rushed over. He grabbed Hu Yukong's face with his two small hands and ravaged it. Stop pretending. I know who you are. You must be Snake Beauty. Don't think that I won't be able to recognize you just because you've disguised yourself as the idiot of the Marquis of Su and's estate. Arbor kneaded and knocked on his face, directly treating his opponent's face like a glutinous rice ball. Hu Yukong's face became distorted in front of everyone. He grimaced in a strange manner and forced himself to say, more rebellious. Stop pinching. I'll let you pretend. Arbor punched Hu Yukong's chin. Grabbing his jet black hair, he punched the same spot 3 times in a row. Then, he took a closer look and muttered curiously, why isn't it dented? If the person in front of her was Snake Beauty, there would be a flaw exposed by shifting his form, twisting his bones, twisting his meridians, and violently punching the same spot, right? Could it be that she was overthinking it? Duan Yu truly sympathized with this Marquis of Su and's estate's old fifth. He raised his hand to cover his face, simply at a loss for words. Chapter 899. Xiao Sun and Xiao Lin each had their mouths agape, and it took a long time before they continued to munch on melon seeds. This guy who had his head smashed by a flower pot yesterday was truly quite miserable, and today he was beaten to this state by Sister. Arbor loosened her grip and carefully examined his chin. It didn't look like he had moved his bones anywhere. You really aren't the Snake Beauty? Arbor suspiciously glanced at the Marquis of Su and's estate's old fifth. She kept feeling that this person was a bit strange. Logically speaking, with his submissive personality, it was unlikely that he would dare to come find trouble with her. Even if he didn't know her before yesterday, it seemed like someone had already informed him of the Crown Princess's identity when she smashed his head. Someone like Hu Yukong, who didn't even dare to let out a fart when he saw His Highness the Crown Prince, still dared to come find the Crown Princess to quarrel?
Cough.
Arbor awkwardly loosened her grip. Just as she was about to reach out to straighten his disheveled collar, the Marquis of Su and's estate's fifth young master shrunk back with all his might and let out a tragic shriek. Don't come over. What are you doing? He covered his chest with both hands, and his eyes were wide as saucers. When he looked at Arbor, even Arbor couldn't resist looking down at her pair of spotlessly white hands. She really didn't want to do anything. Arbor coughed lightly and glanced at Hu Yukong in embarrassment. It's a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. Young master Hu, are you all right? Hu Yukong shrunk his neck and covered his chest as he shouted vehemently, You smashed my head yesterday. Today you hit my chin hard. Tomorrow you want to break my nose crooked. The day after tomorrow, you want to beat my eyes until they're bloodshot. Arbor twitched her mouth, and she quickly reached out to placate him. No, no, no. Don't come over. Young master Hu shrunk back like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. Our dear Arbor's hand froze in midair, just like that. On the other end, Duan Yu was already laughing uncontrollably. He held his forehead and turned his handsome face away, practically unable to bear looking directly at Hu Yukong's tragic and shocked face. How about this? I'll give you a bottle of healing pills. Take it, and you'll be fine in 2 days. Give it to me. Hu Yukong angrily reprimanded him. Arbor was speechless, but he still took out a bottle of pills from his inner world and handed it to him. Hu Yukong hurriedly snatched it over, opened the bottle, and sniffed it. Only then did his expression soften slightly as he muttered, The medicinal pills are not bad. Xiao Mu nodded. Then let's call it quits like this.
No.
Hu Yukong's expression was extremely ugly. You have to be responsible for treating my injuries. Otherwise, I wouldn't have left the Marquis of Jiuan's estate. Even if this matter is reported to the Great King, you will still be the one at fault.
Arbor.
Xiao Zhongban quickly stepped forward to smooth things over. How about this, young master Hu? You go home first. No. Hu Yukong clutched his chest at once, looking like he was about to faint from suffocation. Don't think of chasing me out of the Marquis of Jiyuan's estate before my injuries recover. Arbor's head hurt from his quarreling, and he turned to Chunying to instruct. Arrange for him to stay in the outer courtyard. In at most 3 days, his small injuries will be healed. Humph. Hu Yukong pursed his lips. When he followed the disdainful Chunying into the Marquis's estate's main entrance, he secretly peeked at Arbor's back. Why did you bring this person into the estate? Duan Yu asked unhappily. He couldn't even enter the inner courtyard. So, who was this person so thick-skinned? Chapter 900. Arbor looked around before secretly pulling Duan Yu to the side and whispering, I suspect that there's something strange about this person. Did you just call him a snake beauty?
Who is that?
Duan Yu also couldn't resist asking in a hushed voice. A pervert. Arbor harumphed. A fellow that I especially want to beat up whenever I see her. Duan Yu's mouth twitched before he said with certainty, that person must be especially ugly. Unlike him, who was likable because of his good looks. Arbor nodded, and the two of them huddled together and muttered for a while. Xiao Zhongbang wanted to laugh as he watched from behind, so he coughed and said, Jojo, Dad is going to the capital governor's office and will return at noon. Arbor turned to look at Xiao Zhongbang. He knew that Dad must be going to follow up on the Qiao clan's matter, so he nodded and watched him leave. Jojo, then we'll make an appointment. I'll come pick you up in a few nights. After Duan Yu left with a wave of his paw, Arbor sent the 3 little radishes back to the estate and went to Beautiful Vista Court to talk with her mother. It just so happened that her mother had finished giving out some orders and was free. When she saw her walking over, she happily waved at her. Jojo, you came at the right time.
Mom just wanted to talk to you about something.
What is it, Mom? Wei Ziqin pulled her daughter's hand and sat down on the side. Didn't the Qiao clan all go to jail? From Xiaomo's words, it seems that they want to banish all of them from the capital. Mom was thinking that old 6th Qiao's family was implicated for no reason. I don't know if there's any way to bail them out. The Supreme Court hasn't passed a verdict yet. There's no verdict yet, Arbor said dryly. Mom, banishment isn't Emol Yen's idea, it's mine. I want all these people to disappear from my sight. Wei Ziqin's heart tightened. Then what about your grandmother? Arbor was expressionless. Does Dad also want to bail elderly lady out? Arbor didn't want to make himself feel wronged. This old lady was not much different from her previous life. She caused trouble all day long. Now that she had become like this, she could only blame herself.
Alas.
Wei Ziqin sighed. Although your grandmother disappointed your father, she was still your father's mother. Forget it. You don't have to worry about this matter. Let your father handle it himself. Arbor nodded noncommittally. Is there any way to get Qiao Laolu and his family out? Wei Ziqin asked again. If they don't have a place to stay, we can.
Mom.
Arbor shook his mother's hand.
Don't worry about it.
Don't even think about going through the trouble of bringing her back. A few years ago, you brought an old lady home to serve you all day long. Aren't you tired? Now, he had to get some clan relatives back to entertain them. After all, many years had passed, and it was hard to tell what was in a person's heart. It's not suitable for Qiao Laolu and his family of 3 to stay in our residence. Wei Ziqin glanced at her daughter and sighed helplessly. Daughter, we've been neighbors with your 6th uncle's family for so many years. Mom also hopes that they'll have a good life. Okay. Arbor nodded. I'll make arrangements for them. As for the others, Mom, you don't have to worry about them. Isn't it better to let them quickly stay far away from our home? If you're free, you can embroider flowers and raise plants. Isn't that better? Why do you have to bring back some ancestors to worship? Even if you don't find it tiring, I feel tired for you.
All right.
Wei Ziqin didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she looked at her daughter. Mom knows that you love your mother. Mom understands. Chapter 901. When it was close to noon, Prince Emo came to the Marquis of Jiyuan's estate on his own and picked up Arbor to head to the Supreme Court. On the way, he quietly told her, "Royal Father's decree has already been passed down. Tomorrow, Xiao Dongbua's group will be chased out of the capital." Arbor was currently leaning on him, her teeth gnawing on a piece of dried fruit. When she heard this, she looked up and pursed her lips. "You hid from your dad yesterday and didn't see him. If you went today, how could your dad not speak ill of me to you? He probably poured out his grievances for the entire morning." Emo Lian laughed and wrapped his arms around her. He lowered his head and rested his chin on her head. "Guess what Royal Father said to me? Wasn't it just complaining to you about how fierce I was?" Arbor snorted and replied without thinking, "That's not it. You definitely won't guess." When his dad saw him entering the palace to meet the emperor, he immediately jumped up from his throne in excitement and dryly said to him, "Son, do you think you can buy anything for fun? In the future, buy less of those nonsensical talismans for your wife."
You even bought so many of them.
"Can these talismans be eaten or what?" After Emo Lian repeated it, he couldn't resist laughing first. "The great king simply didn't expect that you drew all these talismans yourself. He even thought that I bought them for you. How about you draw a few talismans on the spot next time and scare him again? Is there such a sarcastic son like you?" Arbor cast him a glance and inwardly cursed him for being a fraud. She reached out to tug on a lock of his inky hair and forcefully tugged. "How is the new batch of ebony?" I asked Bailey, sheet of polish coming along. "It's already in the process of being shipped, right? It should arrive on the day of the Lantern Festival." Emo Lian looked down at her with a grin. "Jojo, I heard that Duanyu came to find you this morning?" "That's right." Arbor rolled his eyes at him. "Why are you always sending your tail to follow me? I'll inform you as soon as there's something going on. I'm just worried about you." Emo Lian continued calmly. "I heard that you smiled at old fifth of the Marquis of Suan's estate." Was she smiling? Arbor raised his hand to touch his cold little face and muttered to himself, "I don't think so. I don't feel anything. He's smiling." Emo Lian nodded her head with certainty. "Lightning, that fellow, even secretly described it." The crown princess suddenly smiled at the Marquis of Suan's residence's old fifth, like a spring breeze brushing against one's face, like 1,000 trees blooming. The Marquis of Suan's estate's old fifth was momentarily stunned. Look. Lightning's description was so accurate. What other information did he not have?
Oh.
That might have been a smile. She didn't have any impression of it. Suddenly, he felt his body lighten. The little fellow who was chewing on a piece of dried fruit was suddenly lifted up and turned around. They looked at each other face to face. "What are you doing?" Our dear Xiao Mu's small face rapidly flushed red at such a close distance, practically sticking to his face. "Smile." "Huh?" Arbor was baffled. He suddenly leaned closer, so close that she could clearly see his long, curly eyelashes fluttering in the wind as they blinked. "Smile." His breath completely enveloped hers, causing her to be completely flustered. She didn't even know where to place her small hands and feet. He was so close that her heart started to sway a bit. Who was this sudden? Who could smile? Smile. He even gripped her small chin with a rather stern expression. Chapter 902. Arbor's large round eyes looked at him, showing a bit of her little white teeth. "You didn't smile." Emo Lian moved closer to her face, using his warm face to rub against her little face. "You have to smile at me like a spring breeze." He was still brooding over that guy Lightning's description. Arbor thought he was a bit funny, reaching out to grab a strand of his hair. "What did Lightning say to you?" "He said you smiled very warmly at Marquis of Suan's family's old fifth." And the key point was that he was stunned. Damn, just thinking about it made him angry. He wasn't there at the time, but he was there to dig out Marquis of Suan's family's old fifth's eyeballs. "I really didn't smile." Arbor herself didn't remember smiling at that guy. If she did, it was most likely a cold smile. "You did smile," he emphasized, hugging her so close that his face was close to hers. As soon as he lowered his head, he could open his mouth and bite her little mouth. Hurry up and smile, or else I'll punish you. Arbor only felt that when this man was childish, he was like a little child asking for candy. That pair of curved phoenix eyes contained a trace of soft grievance, practically melting her heart. You scoundrel. Arbor couldn't help but giggle, subconsciously biting her little mouth, using all her strength to push away his boiling hot body. Hurry and go away. You're about to burn up. I won't go. He hugged her, using all his strength to rub against her body. Smile again. Smile all day long. I'm not an idiot. Arbor was anxious and angry, using a bit more strength to pull on his hair. Hurry and let go. Otherwise I'll pour water on you. I won't let go even if you pour water on me. When a certain person pestered her to the point of being a scoundrel, he was absolutely invincible. Arbor couldn't help but giggle, a sweet smile appearing on her little face. She reached out to poke his shoulder. I'm done laughing. Hurry and let go. Seeing that he didn't have any reaction for a long time, he hugged her and stared at her little face without blinking. Arbor was embarrassed to be stared at like that. He hurriedly covered his phoenix eyes that were as deep as the starry night sky. Why do you keep looking at me? Jojo, you're so beautiful. When I look at you, I feel like my heart is no longer with me. Yes, it looked like it was about to fly. Just let me take a few more glances at you. You can't lose a piece of meat.
Bah.
Arbor turned his face away, puffing out his cheeks and pretending not to look at him. In fact, her heart was beating very fast. She felt that if she was too close to him, he would most likely eavesdrop on her heartbeat and laugh at her. Out of the corner of her eye, she couldn't help but sneak a peek at him. Her sneaky little appearance made Emolienne's heart soften, and she couldn't help but laugh. Emolienne hugged her and rubbed her up and down. Her voice was low and misty as she mumbled, "What should we do, Jojo? You still have 2 months before your hairpin ceremony."
Sigh.
He was so anxious waiting. Xiao Mu's small face turned even redder, and she thumped his back with a moderate amount of force. Suddenly, he felt the carriage shake slightly, as if it was slowly coming to a stop. Arbor tugged on his long hair and whispered anxiously, "We're here. Hurry and let go." Emolienne reluctantly let go of his embrace. Arbor broke away from his embrace with a whoosh, lifted the curtain, and jumped out. The cold wind outside blew, and the heat on her face faded a little. But her heart was beating like a drum, and only she could hear it. It's still 4:00. It's probably going to be 12:00. Don't wait for me. Chapter 903. Arbor reached out to cover her face. When she turned back to see him following her with a smile, she couldn't help but glare at him. This person had a strange charm all over him, like a magnet that always attracted other people's eyes. He was especially annoying. Emolienne didn't care that the little fellow was scowling at him. He was secretly amused as he reached out to take her little hand and pulled her towards the Supreme Court's entrance. We've been to the Supreme Court's prison twice already. I'm familiar with the place, so I won't go down with you, okay? Arbor nodded, using her eyes to indicate for him to let go. You're not going down with me, so why do you keep holding my hand? You're obstructing other people's movements. Emolienne looked at her innocently. I'll send you to the entrance. The Supreme Court's vice-chancellor had already heard the news and ran out to receive them. It was the nearly 40-year-old official that they saw last time. Beside him was a naturally supercilious official. When he saw the Crown Prince and Crown Princess, he also came over to greet them with a smile. Emolienne said in a low voice, "This is Official Ge." Emolienne secretly gave Arbor a look and transmitted a voice into her ear. He's the one who barged into Second Imperial Brothers' food to capture Ding Ting Ding. Arbor was enlightened. She glanced at Official Ge, but didn't say much to him. She followed the Supreme Court's vice-chancellor to the prison. Along the way, the Supreme Court's vice-chancellor politely exchanged greetings with Arbor. The capital's Qiao family are all locked up in the prison in the north. Qiao Donghua and the others are all locked up separately. I don't know which one the Crown Princess wants to see. I don't want to see Qiao Donghua. Arbor pursed her lips. Take me to the prison cells where the Qiao family's commoners are locked up. Yes. The Supreme Court's vice-chancellor called over a jailer to lead the way, and he brought Arbor to the largest prison cells in the north. There were 40 to 50 people locked up in each cell. It was a dark mass, as far as the eye could see. Seeing that someone was coming over, those people were like dying quails. They couldn't help but cry out, "Let me out," one after another. Scram, scram, scram. The jailer swung his whip and flung back the hands that had broken out of the wooden cell. Arbor passed by and searched for 6th Uncle Qiao's family of 3 in the cell. All of a sudden, a person pushed his way to the front of the wooden cage and slammed his head into the cage. He clung onto the wooden pillar and shouted at her, "Arbor, how dare you come to Arbor? You bitch. You caused us to be in this state, and you still dare to come and see us? You black-hearted, venomous woman. Why don't you just die?" A whip struck her hand, and in return, she let out a wail of pain. Arbor turned his head and looked at Joni coldly, a mocking smile on his face. Miss Qiao definitely didn't know that she would live such a miserable life. Arbor tossed her howls and clamors to the back of his mind and strolled past her. He found 6th Uncle Qiao's family of 3 in the 3rd large prison cell. Xiaomu beckoned at the jailer, having him open the cell door. Instantly, many people attempted to charge out. When the jailer saw this, he effortlessly lashed them back with a few whips. "All of you, behave yourselves. You will be exiled to the northwestern desert tomorrow. There's no need to be so anxious. There will always be a chance to let you out." The jailer's gloating words elicited howls and screams from the Qiao family. They had been living and working in peace and contentment in the Mo Kingdom capital these past few years, and they were used to living like princes. How could they possibly adapt to the bitter cold of the northwestern desert? Chapter 904. Arbor, Arbor. A thin, dark-skinned woman screamed as she rushed to the door, but she was whipped back twice by the jailer. Her eyes were red as she glared at Arbor from across the wooden pillars. "Arbor, do you still have a conscience? Do you still have the slightest bit of kinship? Don't you think it's enough that you've caused us to be like this? You actually want to send us to the Northwest Desert?"
You.
Arbor stared icily at the dark-skinned woman from across the cage. This person was her youngest aunt, Su Jiao, whom she hadn't seen in a long time. The current her was even more tanned and skinny than the last time they met, and her chin had already sunken in. Su Jiao looked at Arbor in this state and suddenly prostrated herself on the ground, kowtowing in exhaustion. She sobbed uncontrollably, looking remorseful and heartbroken. "Arbor, eldest niece. Just forgive Uncle, Auntie, and your cousin. Let us out. Don't send us to the Northwest Army. Woo-woo, that really isn't a place where people can stay. Jojo, take it as second aunt's fault in the past. Second aunt has let you down. If you want to blame or resent me, it's up to you. Please, for the sake of our family, for the sake of your father and mother, let us live." "That's right. Jojo, give us a way out." Qiao Zhongheng was truly scared at this time. He originally thought that he could live a good life after being brought back to the Qiao family by Qiao Dongbo, but he didn't expect Qiao Dongbo to be a hypocrite. He found a residence to settle them down, and their family was still starving like before. It was just that the place they lived in was better than the rundown temple, and the decorations in the house were also exquisite. But what was the use of these? They couldn't eat or drink. They only looked good on the surface, but in reality, they were still in a state where they were about to go crazy from hunger every day. Moreover, this time, they didn't do anything. They were completely tricked by Qiao Dongbo and were dragged into prison because of him. They weren't willing to be sent to the Northwest Army like this, so no matter how uncomfortable Su Jiao was, she had no choice but to yield and lower her head at this moment. However, it was as if a fire had ignited in her heart, burning fiercely. She felt that the anger in her heart was about to engulf her. Since when did the people of the first branch become so high and mighty, so high that they couldn't climb up to them? Wei Ziqin, whom she had always looked down on, actually didn't hesitate to use her as an excuse to beg for mercy from the person she had looked down on the most in order to survive. Su Jiao thought with a sour taste in her heart. She raised her head and looked impatiently at this niece, looking like she was begging for her forgiveness. Arbor gazed into Su Jiao's eyes as if he had walked through the long river of history. His long and distant gaze rippled as if it had passed through a century. That pitch-black gaze, without the slightest ripple, caused Su Jiao's heart to become unsettled. Su Jiao felt that her niece's eyes, which were as cold as a dry well, were a bit frightening. It seemed that ever since this niece was 7 years old, she had accidentally rolled down the hill from the academy. After she woke up from her coma, Su Jiao's life started to deteriorate day by day. Su Jiao was quite unwilling, but now, she had no choice but to admit that this niece's current status was something that she probably wouldn't be able to catch up to in this lifetime. Perhaps only by begging for mercy could she obtain a chance of survival. Arbor glanced coldly at Su Jiao. He took out a pouch of money from his sleeve and threw it at Su Jiao's feet. Su Jiao only felt her heart sink with a thump. Chapter 905. At this time, Qiao Zhonghen cowardly shrunk behind his wife, and Qiao Long didn't even dare to let out a fart. Su Jiao gritted her teeth and trembled as she bent down to pick up that money pouch. When she reached out to open the pouch, her eyes immediately bulged when she saw the piece of silver in the pouch. 20 taels. A string seemed to have been plucked in Su Jiao's head, and her entire brain suddenly exploded. Arbor curled his lips, but there wasn't the slightest hint of a smile in his pitch-black eyes as he stared at Su Jiao and said, "Young aunt, back then, if you had even the slightest bit of..." Arbor made a gesture with his pinky. "Conscience. Then you wouldn't have been so heartless as to conspire with Wu Yanjin to sell my younger sister to the Dou family." Su Jiao's entire body trembled uncontrollably, and her eyes were filled with disbelief as she looked up at Arbor. How did you know it was 20 taels? No more, no less. The commission she received was exactly 20 taels. So how did this child Arbor know? That was 8 years ago. Even this old woman didn't know. Arbor was just a 7-year-old child. So how did she know? Arbor coldly swept a glance at Su Jiao as he approached that prison cell step by step. He softly said to her, "Did you know? That young master of the Dou family is a pervert. If you guys really conspired to send my younger sister to that hell on earth, do you think she'll live past 12 years old?" Su Jiao's entire body trembled. Looking at Arbor's nearly morbid expression, she shrieked in fright, "Don't come over." Arbor halted his steps and coldly gazed at this woman. 20 taels to buy the lives of your family of 3.
Keep the change.
Old 6th Qiao and 6th Aunt Qiao both looked up at this time and narrowed their eyes as they glanced at Arbor. They didn't seem to have expected that she would be so ruthless as to abandon her own uncle and aunt. Qiaoya, on the other hand, followed behind her parents. Her pair of cold eyes contained a faint light of confusion as she looked at her just like that. Arbor. Su Jiao was thoroughly flustered. She tightly gripped the money pouch in her hands as she cried, threw a tantrum, and regretted her past actions. Jojo, Auntie knows her mistake. Auntie really knows her mistake. Can you give me another chance? Or maybe you should give your cousin a chance. Your cousin was just a child 8 years ago. He didn't know anything. He's innocent. Jojo, I beg you, don't be so cruel. Innocent. Xiao Mu sneered as she turned around to look at her deeply. If he hadn't been reborn, his sister Jolin would have died next year. At that time, who would give Jolin another chance? Who could pity Jolin? Who could sympathize with her? A person who had lost her mother, her younger sister, and her younger brother. Who could sympathize with her? Her future would be so bleak. Don't blame her for being ruthless. It was an era where either you die or I die. It was better for you to die. Qiaoya and her parents followed behind Arbor and walked out of the prison cell under other people's envious gazes. All sorts of feelings welled up in her heart. When she walked into the sunlight, she saw that person turn around and smile foolishly at her. Her ice-cold heart seemed to have been melted by something as it slightly smoothed out. Xiaomu sprinted towards Emol Yen and ran headfirst into his embrace. Prince Emo was bursting with joy when he saw that face begging for a hug. Chapter 906. His little fellow had taken the initiative to ask for a hug. It was such a good thing. So, of course, he had to firmly grasp it and hug her tightly without letting go. Xiaoya was startled, and her expression was somewhat dazed as she looked at the two people hugging in front of her. Her emotions flashed quickly, and then she lowered her head again, without saying a word. Xiaoya. Sixth Aunt Xiao secretly said to her daughter, "It's all thanks to Jojo. Oh, no, Crown Princess, that we were able to come out this time. It's all thanks to the Crown Princess' benevolence. Don't have that expression, relax." Sixth Aunt Xiao was afraid that her daughter would offend Arbor, so she hurriedly warned her daughter in a low voice. Xiaoya's expression became more stiff, even a little unnatural, and her head stiffly turned away. Emo Lian calmed the little fellow's emotions and asked softly, "What's wrong? Did the Qiao family say something unpleasant?" Arbor shook his head.
Who cares what they said?
"It's fine, I just suddenly wanted to
Hug you."
After saying that, the little fellow even reached out to tease a certain person's face. Prince Emo was stunned, and a layer of red quietly crept onto his ears. He hugged Arbor and muttered softly, "You can hug me whenever you want. You can hug me for as long as you want. It's best if you don't let go." "You're dreaming," Arbor muttered softly and reached out to push him. "Let's go." Emo Lian raised her hand to touch her own face.
And
it was indeed a beautiful face, In order to reassure his mother, Arbor specially arranged for sixth Uncle Qiao and his family to live in a small residence on Shiluo Street. The residence had 2 entrances and was of moderate size. It was more than enough for 3 people to live in. Sixth Aunt Xiao tried to get close to her along the way, but she kept calling her Crown Princess instead of the usual Jojo, and the conversation was awkward everywhere. In addition, the Crown Prince, this great Buddha, was present. Sixth Aunt Xiao and sixth Uncle Qiao were so uneasy that they didn't know where to put their hands and feet. They occasionally spoke along the way, but it was quite awkward. Later, they simply stopped talking. When they arrived at the boundary of Shiluo Street, the carriage stopped at the intersection. There were tents all around, so the passage wasn't very smooth. It would be faster to walk. Emo Lian held Arbor's hand and led Xiao Laolu and his family to the entrance of the small house. Xiaoya had been silent all this while. At this moment, she raised her head and quickly scanned the house. Something flashed through her eyes and quickly disappeared. "From now on, you can stay here." Xiao Mu glanced at Xiaoya, who had her head lowered, before turning to say to sixth Aunt Xiao, "This small residence is basically complete, so you don't need to add anything else. You can directly move in." Yes. Thank you, Crown Princess."
Thank you."
Xiao Lu's aunt hurriedly bowed and expressed her gratitude. Arbor felt a little uncomfortable seeing her being so polite. He sighed softly and said, "If there's nothing else, the Crown Prince and I will take our leave first." Xiaoya swiftly tugged at her mother's sleeve. Sixth Aunt Xiao froze for a moment before hastily saying with an obsequious smile, Crown Princess, how much food is in this residence? How long will it last our family of 3? Arbor was slightly taken aback and casually said, "It shouldn't be a problem to eat the food until the Lantern Festival. Sister Xiaoya is also a mystic cultivator, so she can go to the city plaza to accept missions to earn mystic currency. When the time comes, she can use the mystic currency to buy food at the food hall." Oh. Sixth Uncle Qiao and sixth Aunt Xiao answered obsequiously before sending Arbor and the Crown Prince out the door. The end of the 7th chapter. Fragmented Dreams. Chapter 907. After leaving old sixth Qiao's home, Arbor felt rather fed up and didn't really want to talk after boarding the carriage. Emolian sat next to her and reached out to rub her small face. "Why are you spacing out? It's enough after doing this. Everyone has their own lives. Let them be. You're upset because of some random people. I'm not happy to see that. When our family was in dire straits in the past, Sixth Uncle Chiao's family would occasionally send some food over to help us out. Arbor sighed and said, I know what Mother is thinking. A drop of water should be repaid with a gushing spring. That's right. We should repay Sixth Uncle's kindness. Logically speaking, with our current family circumstances, it shouldn't be a big problem to help if we can. But I keep feeling that. My heart doesn't feel too good. Arbor turned to look at Emolian and grabbed his large palm. Did you see Sixth Aunt's appearance just now? She didn't treat me as a junior at all. She was too courteous and made me feel uncomfortable all over. No. To be precise, it was a hint of flattery, which was too unbearable to look at. In reality, she would rather be like before. However, Sixth Uncle's family, which used to be simple and unadorned, seemed to have completely vanished into thin air in the torrent of time. I know that the human heart is the most fickle thing, Arbor said aloofly. It was me who didn't know how to be flexible and worried about nothing. You're babbling nonsense. Emolian pulled her into his arms and stared at her intently. The human heart is fickle. It's referring to those who sail according to the wind and have unstable minds. I won't change. My feelings for you can be proven by the river of time. Emolian lowered his head and kissed her small cheek. Seeing some melancholy in her expression, he couldn't resist adding, there are plenty of strong-willed people in this world. Take that guy Duan Yu, for example. Although he looks especially unreliable, his thoughts and willpower aren't something that anyone can change. Arbor's mouth twitched. She looked up at that man and couldn't resist laughing. Are you praising him or insulting him? Scoundrel. Always bad-mouthing Duan Yu behind his back. Of course, it was damage. Emolian pursed her lips. I heard that he invited you to the Lantern Festival. Arbor tilted his head and looked at him with a half-smile.
Are you not coming?
Of course I'm coming. In Xiaomu's opinion, boys were really quite noisy. When things were good, they were so close that they could wear the same pair of pants. When things were bad, they would kill each other anytime and anywhere. When she thought of the Lantern Festival, she would have to drag the 3 little radish heads along with the 2 boys who would fight each other from time to time. Her heart was shrouded in a faint trace of sadness. My Joe's section break. The Marquis of Su An's estate was located rather far from Minshun Avenue. Compared to the bustling Minshun Avenue, the Marquis of Su An's estate was rather remote. Ever since the 4th princess forced Hu family's old third, the Prince Consort, to death, the Marquis of Su An's residence became more and more destitute. Now, even the lintel of the door was peeling off. Only half of the word and was left. When the estate's maidservant passed through the sparse corridor, she cowered to the side when she encountered Hu Yukong. Unexpectedly, young master, who didn't even look at her and walked away with his hands behind his back. It looked like he was returning to his own courtyard. He actually didn't come up to touch her. The maidservant dazedly stared at young master whose back. Could it be that red rain was going to fall from the sky? She looked up at the sky. Chapter 908. Creek. Hu Yukong casually kicked open the door to his own courtyard. Looking at the swaying and broken door, he clicked his tongue and shook his head, a trace of disdain flashing through his eyes. What Marquis' estate? With this kind of wealth, it was simply laughable. Hu Yukong walked straight into his room, closed the door, and walked in front of 100 treasure grid. There was no need to mention the shabby appearance of this 100 treasure grid. On top of it was a leaping horse with paint peeling off, as well as a few cheap jade pendants. Hu Yukong turned a button on the lowest level of the 100 treasure grid. With a whoosh, the 100 treasure grid moved to the left, revealing a small secret room behind it. Hu Yukong continued to click his tongue. Not to mention how crude this mechanism was, just this fucking impoverished Marquis' estate, which didn't even have a billionth of his treasures, still gave him a shitty secret room. In the beginning, he was so excited that he wanted to die. He thought that this guy had really hidden some good stuff, but in the end, there was only a broken copper cauldron, 2 chests of gold ingots, and a few bags of rations. Whoa! In the center of the small secret room, a man and woman were tied to a stool, back to back. They looked in horror at the Hu Yukong who walked in. Their mouths were gagged with a rag, so they could only make muffled sounds. Their expressions were also somewhat twisted. Woo what? Hu Yukong suddenly stepped forward and kicked the leg of the man on the stool. If I didn't see that your place is clean, do you think I would like to stay in your broken place? It's just borrowing a place.
Look at how stingy you are.
Hu Yukong kicked him 2 more times, then suddenly smiled maliciously. The person tied to the stool was Hu Yukong himself. Speaking of his bad luck, didn't it start from that day in Spring Dawn Garden? After returning from Spring Dawn Garden after being smashed in the head by a fierce woman, Hu Yukong found someone to treat him. After that, he felt that it was difficult to get rid of the gloominess in his chest. That night, he grabbed a young servant girl to relieve his stuffiness. Who knew that halfway through the good deed, the back of his head would be ruthlessly smashed by someone. His eyes rolled back, and he fainted. When he woke up, he was tied up in this secret room along with the average-looking servant girl. And the most terrifying thing was that this woman, who was so enchanting and beautiful that a single glance from her could seduce people to death, actually turned into a living person in front of him. In the blink of an eye, she turned into Hu Yukong's appearance. It was simply too horrifying. A woman suddenly turned into a man. It wasn't a disguise, but a real transformation of his body. Even his Adam's apple could be seen clearly. This was really too frightening, especially at that moment, when he saw Hu Yukong smiling at him with his identical face. The real Hu Yukong felt as if he was about to suffocate. You good for nothing, look at how scared you are. Hu Yukong used an unprepossessing man's face to smile like a flirtatious woman. The real Hu Yukong was so scared that his eyes rolled back and he almost fainted on the spot. He never knew that he could smile so horribly. The illusion of looking at himself in the mirror made him shudder. Hey, I won't tease you anymore. The Hu Yukong in front of him, who had an ordinary face, slowly turned into a beautiful woman with pink lips and enchanting eyebrows as the bones in her body cracked. Her voice also changed from a man's voice to a soft female voice. Chapter 909. Once again, he saw the snake beauty successfully transform from Hu Yukong into a beautiful woman. Her entire face, height, figure, and fat had all undergone a terrifying transformation. Greatly agitated, Hu Yukong's eyes rolled back as he finally fainted. Meanwhile, the young maidservant tied together with Hu Yukong was also slightly agape. Because of fear and dread, her entire body trembled incessantly, and cold sweat rolled down her forehead as if she had just been fished out of a river. Tisk, tsk, tsk. The snake beauty sighed and swayed her snake-like waist as she walked up to the young maidservant. The snake beauty slightly lowered her waist, and her face was practically pressed against the young maidservant's face. Her fragrant breath blew past the young maidservant's face. Don't be afraid. Don't worry. I'm a good person. HM? The young maidservant widened her eyes in horror, and her brain seemed to have lost the ability to speak due to the agitation. She could only nod while trembling. The snake beauty giggled and walked to the table on the side without consulting anyone. She then rolled up her sleeves and started to grind ink and lay out paper. If it weren't for the fact that this Hu Yukong is so useless, why would I come back now? Sigh. She had finally managed to sneak into the Qiao residence, but in the end, the number of times she had seen this little fiend could be counted on one hand. Moreover, she would stare at her with extreme vigilance every time. She really didn't know where she had exposed herself. They clearly had different faces, so how could she see through the clues every time? Ever since she had failed to find her in Bailon City, she could only return to the Mo Kingdom capital to look for her. Unfortunately, it was difficult to get close to her even after finding her. How vexing. Holding the ink brush, the snake beauty pondered for a while, with her chin propped up. Then, with a slight smile, she suddenly lowered her head and started scribbling. After she finished writing, she picked up the entire piece of paper and pouted her small mouth to blow at the ink that hadn't dried yet. A poppy smile spread across her beautiful small face. Squeak, squeak, squeaked, squeak, squeak, squeak. In the Mo Kingdom capital's central plaza, there was an extremely large and long mission board constructed from lapis lazuli. All kinds of missions were posted on it for people to choose from. Many special operations teams would come here every few days to take on a mission in order to maintain their daily necessities. On this day, as usual, there were people coming and going in the city's central plaza. There were too many to count of those who were accepting and handing in missions. When teams that were familiar with each other met, they would politely greet each other and ask each other questions. It was almost noon today, and there were quite a few team members gathered in front of the mission panel. Just like before, they were searching for the mission they wanted to take on according to the various mission lists. Then, everyone's eyes fell on a piece of crimson paper that was stained with ink and had a few words written in flamboyant calligraphy. That wasn't an ordinary mission announcement, but, make way, please make way. The vice captain of the giant bear squad, Hannah Mushroom, moved her large body and squeezed into the crowd. Why are you all in a daze in front of the panel? Hurry up and leave after taking the mission slip. All of you are standing here. Hey, look, are my eyes playing tricks on me? You're not seeing things. This is a visit at the Spring Lantern Festival. He must take away the Northern Prince, Mo's favorite. Notice is hereby given. Signed by Ding Ting Ding. Hua Gu's eyes almost popped out of their sockets as she shouted, "Holy shit! Am I seeing things? Ding Ting Ding has issued a challenge to His Highness the Crown Prince." Ding Ting Ding? What Ding Ting Ding? Is it that Ding Ting Ding? Which Ding Ting Ding is there in this world? Fuck, Ding Ting Ding has gone overboard this time. Wait. Chapter 910. Wow. Ding Ting Ding is going against His Highness the Crown Prince this time. How can this be the same as those people in the past? Oh my god. I'll bet with you that Ding Ting Ding's plan to steal this time will definitely fail. What kind of person is His Highness? He won't let that bastard get away with it. The crowd was in a frenzy as they discussed the matter. Loud noises could be heard everywhere. Guess what treasure His Highness the Crown Prince treasures? Could it be some kind of heaven-defying cultivation technique, or something like that? Or some kind of miraculous elixir? Holy shit, Ding Ting Ding can't be coveting His Highness's vast territory, right? Out of the way, out of the way. Everyone, disperse and make way for His Highness. Everyone, out of the way. Don't crowd this place. 2 rows of guards ran over and pushed the crowd to the sides. That lapis lazuli panel was revealed from the bustling crowd. A tall, ink-colored figure slowly approached the lapis lazuli panel. He coldly stared at the piece of red paper fluttering in the wind. He raised his right hand slightly and suddenly clenched his 5 fingers. That piece of red paper flew into his hand with a whoosh. The man's eyes lowered as he coldly stared at the piece of red paper in his hand. No one knew this better than he did. Whatever heaven-defying cultivation technique, miraculous elixir, or even the vast territory, none of them were his treasures. Ding Ting Ding, that damned bastard, actually wanted to extend his demonic claws to his treasure. He wanted to kill this guy with his own hands. Emol Yen's eyes were cold as he tightly clenched the piece of red paper in his hand. When he opened his hand again, the paper had already turned into nothingness and scattered with the wind. Over 1,000 people had gathered in the city's central plaza, but no one dared to speak. His Highness's deterrence was truly a bit terrifying. Everyone could tell that the man was in a very bad mood right now. Who still dared to provoke His Highness at this juncture? It wasn't like they were tired of living. Although no one dared to say it out loud, they were still rather curious. They were even looking forward to the arrival of the Lantern Festival. Ding Ting Ding had been undefeated for many years and was known as the thief sage Ding Ting Ding. They really didn't know if he would fail to steal His Highness's item this time. If he failed, that would break his record of 0 defeats. Several days later, in the estate of the Marquis of Jiyuan, when Arbor heard the report that the goods from Southern Bailey had arrived, she guessed that it must be her batch of ebony. When he ran out to take a look, he saw that the entire manor was surrounded by the children of the Hidden Night Pavilion, leaving not even a drop of water to trickle through. There were more than 30,000 pieces of ebony delivered. Arbor was in a good mood. For the time being, she planned to throw this batch of ebony into her inner world. However, she wouldn't foolishly put it away at the front door. It was better to let someone drag it into the house first. She didn't want anyone to suspect why her inner world was so big. After the things were moved into his courtyard, Arbor asked Xiao Yao, who was beside him, "Xiao Yao, do you feel that there are a lot more people around me these days? Why do I feel like this court is being surrounded by people from all directions?" Xiao Yao's mouth twitched. "Miss, Ding Ting Ding has already challenged His Highness to a battle. How can His Highness not be nervous?" "Oh, he's here to steal from him." Arbor nodded. "Stealing from him isn't stealing from me. Why did he get so many people to surround me?" "Miss, Ding Ting Ding wants to steal His Highness's most beloved. Isn't that you?" Chapter 9:11. Arbor turned to look at Xiao Yao in astonishment. "It can't be."
What can't be?
Xiao Yao was about to be defeated by her little master. "I'm a living person. Doesn't he only steal things? Why would he steal from me?" Arbor stared blankly for a moment before shaking her head and saying, "Doesn't he have to provide food for me even if he steals from me? That's not a loss." Xiao Yao didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she looked at her. "My dear master, that Ding Ting Ding is clearly here to provoke His Highness. Do you think he lacks that bit of food from you?" Emolian had been so busy these past 2 days that she didn't come over. Who knew if she was secretly investigating Ding Ting Ding's whereabouts? Arbor was in a rather good mood after cleaning up her ebony pieces. She turned to Xiao Yao and said, "Xiao Yao, let's add more dishes tonight." Xiao Yao didn't make much of a fuss when she heard about adding more dishes this time. She looked at her worried expression with a bitter expression. "What's wrong? You're not even happy about adding more dishes." Arbor went up to grab her little hand and said, let's go. Come with me to the kitchen to take a look and see what dishes we should add. Do you want to drink chicken soup?" "Miss, why aren't you worried at all?" It turned out that when Miss received the news a few days ago, she was still in a daze and didn't know that Ding Ting Ding's target this time was her. No wonder she had been so carefree these past few days. "What am I worried about?" Arbor snorted disdainfully. "If he dares to come, I'll kill him while I'm at it. Then everything will be fine." Xiao Yao turned her head and saw that her Miss's expression was especially serious and didn't look like she was joking. She couldn't help but burst out laughing. "That's right. My Miss is so powerful. How could she be captured by that brat successfully? Let's go." Arbor pointed in the direction of the kitchen and dragged Xiao Yao away. "Xiao Yao, do you want to ask Mo Lien to withdraw some men? I heard that my father went out for a walk yesterday and almost couldn't enter the house when he came home." Xiao Yao hurriedly shook her head. "Let's not. Tomorrow was the Spring Lantern Festival. That Ding Ting Ding had said that he would come to take the young miss away at high. I don't know if he'll try to be sneaky and secretly change the time.
It'll be hard to guard against that."
"Take me away?" Darling Xiao rolled her eyes. She made it sound like she was an object. She was a living person. If he said he wanted to come and get it, would she be able to foolishly follow him? It's not like he's sick. All right, don't worry. We'll worry about tomorrow's matters tomorrow. Let's have a good meal tonight." When Xiao Yao thought of the chicken soup that Miss mentioned, she couldn't help smacking her lips and giggling. The next day, Mo Lien personally came to the Marquis of Jiyuan's estate to welcome her father-in-law's family into the palace. The Lantern Festival would be held at noon today, and the people attending were all the people she had met at the New Year's banquet that day. They were the families of third-rank officials and above. The banquet would end at Shin, and everyone could leave the palace to move about freely. The Luo family troupe would be singing in the palace for the entire day today, so the madams and young misses who were interested had gone to Clearwater Fine Park early to watch the opera. The entire Mo Kingdom capital was in a carnival tonight, and there was also a Grand Lantern Festival. All the upper-class madams and young misses planned to join in the fun. The carriage entered the palace unimpeded. Mo Lien was summoned to the old Great King's study. Before leaving, he repeatedly urged her to be careful and safe before leaving in a hurry. "Miss, there are many people today, so you really have to be careful." Xiao Yao looked like she was facing a great enemy, vigilantly checking the people walking past them from time to time. Chapter 912. That Ding Ting Ding said that he'll come to steal at night. According to Xiao Yao's calculations, that's when you'll be heading to the Lantern Festival. Why don't we cancel the lantern viewing event? Xiao Yao hurriedly said.
No.
That guy isn't qualified enough for me to change my schedule. Arbor curved her lips and snorted. Sister, what are you talking about? Xiao Lin leaned close to her and asked in a small voice as her eyes turned shrewdly. Nothing. Arbor raised her hand to rub her sister's head. Xiao Lin reached out to hold her arm. Sister, it's still early.
Let's go sit over there for a while.
As soon as Arbor moved, Xiao Yao followed closely by her side and followed the two sisters in that direction. Wei Ziqin still found it strange. Xiao Yao, did something happen these past few days? I keep feeling that Little Mo's expression was a bit off when he looked at our Jojo today. He looked so nervous. Xiao Yao didn't dare to say anything more to Wei Ziqin. She hurriedly shook her head and said, No, madam, you don't need to worry. His Highness is so capable. Don't worry, he won't let anything happen to Mississippi. The mother and daughters walked towards a waterside pavilion in Clearwater Fine Park. When they got closer, they saw a group of people walking along the waterside pavilion from the end of the winding white jade corridor. The one leading the group was a girl with a rather haughty attitude. Wei Ziqin recognized at a glance that this girl was the Zheng family's third miss, Her Highness Consort Zheng's niece. As for the two people behind her, they were no stranger to her. The Marquis of Placation's estate's third Miss Su Mingzhu and fourth Miss Su Mingxin. Wei Ziqin's footsteps paused, and she hesitated whether to walk over to greet them. Looking at her two daughters, they had already walked over confidently, hand in hand. Her head hurt when she saw this banquet. If interacting less with people could save her trouble, Wei Ziqin would be happy to hide away. The two groups met in the treasured jade pavilion. Crown Princess. Zhang San wasn't stupid. He nodded and bowed when he saw Arbor. Su Mingzhu gritted her teeth and tightly clenched the handkerchief in her hand. She followed her fourth sister, Su Mingxin, and bowed to Arbor while cursing her in her heart. During their encounter at the Spring Dawn Garden, she had been seriously injured. If it wasn't for the fact that her family had taken out pills to treat her injuries, she wouldn't have been able to walk in just a few days. Su Mingzhu hated Arbor so much that her teeth were itching. However, she had learned her lesson from being impulsive last time. This time, she held her breath and stood aside. She didn't say anything and just looked at Arbor coldly. Third young Miss Zheng smiled at Arbor and said, This jade treasure pavilion has beautiful and elegant scenery. If the Crown Princess doesn't mind, would you like to sit down and have a drink with me? Arbor looked at her deeply and shook his head. No need. After saying that, he pulled his sister and turned to leave. Behind him, Zhang San bit her lip, feeling rather aggrieved. Wei Ziqin's heart was also in turmoil. Seeing that her daughter didn't want to mingle with these girls, she couldn't help but sigh in relief. She nodded repeatedly and followed her daughter out of the pavilion. Unexpectedly, before Arbor could take 2 steps, she was bumped into by a maidservant who pounced on her. Her clean dress was immediately stained with some tea foam, looking very indecent. Arbor looked at that maidservant coldly. You did it on purpose. That maidservant trembled in fright. Her legs went soft, and she knelt on the ground. She repeatedly kowtowed and begged for mercy. Crown Princess, have mercy. Crown Princess, have mercy. Very good. Arbor's lips curled into a cold arc. I'll fulfill your wish. Chapter 913. Is there anyone who doesn't have eyes and dares to barge in like you on a perfectly good road? This was the Imperial Palace. Which servant girl could be so reckless and live for so long? If she was so blind, she would have been played to death by the Imperial concubines long ago. She could tell at a glance that it was fake, yet she still wanted to deceive her. Xiao Lin also pursed her lips with a displeased expression. Even with her intelligence, she could see that there was something fishy about this matter, let alone her astute and sharp older sister. The young royal maid was so frightened that her face turned pale, and she kept peeking at Arbor's expression. When he heard Xiao Mu call for help, his entire body went limp on the ground. On the side, Zheng San's complexion also turned slightly pale. She didn't expect that the crown princess would be so ruthless and really want to punish that royal maid without saying anything. She didn't follow the script at all, and was simply terrifying. When Lightning and the other person suddenly appeared, the noble ladies were all frightened. They watched helplessly as the two hidden guards dragged the person away. When the royal maid's miserable screams came from afar, third young Miss Zheng's small face turned deathly pale. Arbor stroked the dirt on her skirt and looked coldly at Zheng San. "Didn't you say you wanted to treat me to tea?" Zheng San nervously gripped a corner of her skirt and repeatedly nodded while trembling with fear. Yes, yes. Come, prepare the tea." The tea was quickly prepared again. At this time, Su Mingzhu was a bit scared. She felt that the crown princess suddenly staying behind wasn't a good thing. She clearly said that she didn't want to drink tea. Arbor sat in front of them. Her harsh gaze forced the young ladies to not dare to sit down. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly and stood in front of her with their hands hanging down. She leisurely picked up the teacup, sniffed it, and said indifferently, "Top-quality snow sprout tea. It looks really good." "It's good that the crown princess likes it." Third young Miss Zheng sighed in relief and bowed respectfully. "Come here." Arbor suddenly raised her head and beckoned to Zheng San. "This cup of tea is for you." Third young Miss Zheng was so frightened that her whole body trembled. Instead of advancing, she retreated several steps. Xiao Mu gazed at her coldly. "You look so guilty and fearful. It looks like you did something shameful. Did you add something to this cup of tea?" Third Miss Zheng shook her head frantically.
No.
How could this little girl dare to do something like murder the crown prince consort in broad daylight with so many people watching? Arbor nodded in understanding. "Then you're worried that I've done something to the tea. What if I insist that you drink it now?" Arbor's ice-cold eyes stared deeply at third Miss Zheng, whose forehead was drenched in cold sweat. With a slight lift of her chin, Xiao Yao immediately walked out from behind her. Taking the teacup from her hand, she strode forward and unceremoniously reached out to pinch third young Miss Zheng's cheeks, pressing her entire body backward until her waist was slightly bent. "Don't be so shameless when the crown princess gives you a reward," Xiao Yao coldly shouted and directly poured the cup of rather hot tea into third young Miss Zheng's mouth. MMPH. Third young Miss Zheng, who was in great pain from her cheeks being pinched, resisted repeatedly with a terrified expression. She was forced to drink more than half of the tea, which splashed all over her head and face.
Bam!
The teacup rolled to the ground and shattered into several pieces. Third young Miss staggered and sat limply on the ground. Tea seeped out of the corner of her mouth, and she coughed awkwardly as she bent over, as if desperately trying to spit out the tea that was poured into her mouth. Chapter 9:14. When Su Mingxin saw that Arbor was enraged and had already knelt down, how could she still dare to speak? She was only an insignificant concubine's daughter. It was already good enough that she could play it safe. She was only afraid that she would be implicated by her foolish older sister. Su Mingzhu retreated many steps and hid to the side with an extremely unsightly expression. How could she still dare to speak up for third Miss Zheng at this time? "Young master," that palace maid confessed. She quickly walked to Arbor's side, her words causing third Miss Zheng's expression to change greatly. Arbor nodded at her. Soon, the pale-faced palace maid was dragged over like a dead dog. She did not have any external injuries on her body, but it was obvious that she was completely unharmed. "Speak." Arbor coldly glanced at that palace maid. "Are you a member of Sephora Flower Palace?" That little palace maid trembled with fear and trepidation as she nodded her head. Third Miss Zheng was furious when she saw this and couldn't help but roar. "Impudent! This young lady has never seen you in Sephora Flower Palace before. Don't think of randomly accusing people." The little palace maid tearfully glanced at third Miss Zheng and couldn't help but wail, "Miss, this servant really can't take it anymore. Just now, Those hidden guards made her, an ordinary woman, suffer the pain of having her tendons torn and bones dislocated. How could she bear it? It was simply more unbearable than death. Third Miss Jung sat on the ground in a sorry state, the corners of her mouth tightly pursed as she glared fiercely at the palace maid. Her gaze seemed to be saying, "Do you think that now that you've confessed in front of the crown princess, your highness Consort Jung will still let you off?" The little palace maid trembled so much that her entire body swayed. Arbor expressionlessly glanced at Third Miss Jung before turning to look at the palace maid. "Why don't I take a guess? What does Jung he want to do this time?" Unwilling to be left out. "If I had fallen into your trap, then I would have had to follow you, who had atoned for your crimes by meritorious service. To change clothes, right?" Qiao Mu's cold gaze landed on the junior royal maid as sharp as a knife. "Let me think, where do you want to lead me to?" Arbor slowly stood up and approached the palace, maid step by step. "You want to lead me to Jung He, right? Where are you going?" "Jung, he must have arranged a masquerade show and is waiting for me." Arbor's eyebrows curved as he looked at the palace maid with a mocking expression. The little palace maid widened her eyes in horror. She still hadn't said anything? The crown princess had already guessed most of it. It was very simple. Arbor had exposed Jung He's fake pregnancy at the New Year's banquet. With Jung He's temperament, she would definitely not let Arbor keep this secret. She would take advantage of the situation. To have a miscarriage. Of course, it would be even better if the crown princess could suffer a great misfortune during this miscarriage. Thus, Jung He's plan was very easy to guess, and Arbor was pretty much right on the mark. In the palace, Arbor was always on guard and always kept an eye out, so how could she fall into Consort Zheng's trap? "You slut." Third Miss Jung struggled to get up and bared her fangs, wanting to push that palace maid to the ground. She believed that the palace maid had secretly leaked the secret, which was why the situation had turned out this way. "Tie her up," Arbor bluntly rebuked. Xiaoyao immediately took out a thick hemp rope and tightened it in her hand before walking over to Third Miss Jung. "The Great King has arrived. Kneel." The old Great King of Mo Kingdom walked over with a face full of anger. When he saw the situation inside the Jade Pavilion, he couldn't help but angrily shout, "Crown Princess." Chapter 9:15. Qiao Mu coldly turned her head around and shot her gaze at the king, who was charging over in fury. Behind the Great King was a Taoist priest in his 40s with a clear temperament. Dressed in green robes, he appeared to have the air of a transcendent being. Gong Chang'an wiped away the sweat on his forehead as he followed behind them with small steps. Apart from the Great King, the Crown Prince and a group of civil and military officials also quickly walked over. Arbor greets the Great King. Arbor calmly bowed. Without waiting for the Great King to speak, he naturally wouldn't let himself be wronged and straightened up. "You." The Great King's expression was filled with rage. Before he could speak, the Crown Prince had already flashed in front of the Crown Princess. "Disgraceful thing." The Great King opened his mouth to scold his son, but when he looked up, he saw Empress Zhao walking over with many concubines and noble ladies. After the greeting, Empress Zhao calmly said, "This concubine heard that Consort Zheng just had a miscarriage in Sephora Flower Palace. This is truly too unfortunate. A while ago at the New Year's banquet, little sister Noble Consort seemed to be doing quite well. This happened so suddenly that I'm afraid there's something fishy going on." The Great King instantly exploded like a lit firecracker. When he received the news just now, he couldn't keep his cool. His son, whom he had gotten at such an old age, was mysteriously gone. How could he not be furious? If he hadn't lost his rationality due to anger, he wouldn't have directly stood up and led all the civil and military officials here to settle the score with the Crown Princess. Now, his son had clearly made his stance firm and stood on his wife's side. With so many people present, the Great King found it difficult to back down. "Daoistayu, please speak." The Great King smirked and coldly said. It was that sage-like Taoist priest who took a step forward. His gaze swept over Arbor in a strange manner, and then he said indifferently, This humble Taoist has calculated that there is a vicious aura coming from the southeast. It will soar into the heavens and transform into a blade that will cut towards Sephora Flower Palace. I just reminded the Great King that this murderous aura might be harmful to the Great King's unborn children. Priest Dayu shook his head and sighed. I didn't expect news of her ladyship's miscarriage to arrive so soon. Mo Lien sneered. Taoist priest, if that's the case, then you're a person who can predict destiny. Why don't you help me divine my fortune for this month? If there's even the slightest mistake, I'll take your life. Crown Prince, the Great King shouted angrily. He hadn't expected the Crown Prince to be so disrespectful to Priest Dayu in front of so many officials. Although Priest Dayu had been in the palace for less than 10 days, his predictions were always accurate. He could even provide the old Great King with pills that could relieve his body's pressure. The old Great King felt that those pills were even better than the body-strengthening pills provided by the Qin Estate's patriarch. After taking them, he indeed felt much more energetic. The Great King was displeased that the Crown Prince treated Priest Dayu in such a manner. However, Prince Mo didn't give the Taoist priest any face at all. Withdraw. What vicious aura. It's all non-existent. If you dare to be disrespectful to my Crown Princess, I guarantee that even the Great King won't be able to save your life. Crown Prince. The Great King was truly furious this time. Wasn't his wife protecting demon a bit too much? How could he embarrass his old father in front of so many civil and military officials? How infuriating! Empress Xiao hastily walked up to tug on her son's sleeve and comforted him. Crown Prince, how can you speak to royal father like that? Chapter 9:16. Jung he had a miscarriage, and all of you rushed over to find the Crown Princess. Don't you think this is the biggest joke in the world? Your Highness, this is a vicious person. She's not suitable to be the Crown Princess of a country. Priest Dayu looked honest and sincere as he earnestly tried to persuade the Crown Prince. Stinky priest, what did you say? Jolin shouted angrily. She was like a lioness that was about to explode. Her hair stood on end. Crown Prince Mo mercilessly slapped the Taoist priest's cheek. However, the Taoist priest shifted his body to the side and escaped from the Crown Prince's palm wind. He was as fast as an afterimage as he stood steadily in front of Qiao Mu. Arbor could clearly see a trace of mockery in Priest Dayu's eyes. It was as if he was mocking her for overestimating herself. She came from a humble background, yet she wanted to fly up the branches and become a phoenix. She wanted to be the crown princess of a country?
But why?
It was her first time meeting this person. She could clearly feel a strong hostility from this person. Mo Lien's anger accumulated in his eyes. He suddenly drew a circle with his left hand and was about to launch a fire attack. His hand was suddenly grasped by Arbor's soft little hand. The storm-like anger in his heart was instantly soothed by her little kitten claw-like hand. The dark clouds parted to see the blazing sun. In a trance, it was a sunny day. This change could be seen by everyone present as long as they weren't blind. They couldn't help but exclaim in their hearts at the power of the Crown Princess. Their willful His Highness the Crown Prince had fallen into the hands of the Crown Princess like this. Stinky priest, what do you mean? Jung He's miscarriage this time was caused by my vicious aura? Big sister. Xiao Lin was very anxious in her heart. How could elder sister say such words without any hesitation? What if she gave others a groundless title of Heavenly Calamity Star or something like that? What should she do? Unfortunately, I happen to know the real reason behind Jung He's miscarriage. Arbor's sleeves fluttered. Taoist Dayu, who had been paying attention to her all this time, subconsciously took a small step back. Two dictum talismans floated in front of her. With a whoosh, they turned into two streaks of light, directly pouncing onto third Miss Zheng and the young royal maid behind her, one on the left and one on the right. What are you doing? When the Great King saw the two talismans, his eyes couldn't help but bulge. He cast a dissatisfied look at his son. I already told you not to buy those messy talismans for the Crown Princess to play with. You all know third Miss Zheng, right? Why don't we let her tell us what Jung he wants to do to me? Crown Princess, what did you do to my daughter? State Uncle Jung didn't know why, but he felt guilty and flustered without any reason, and he hurriedly walked out of the crowd to berate her. Arbor glanced at him coldly, then turned to ask, Third Miss, tell everyone what your aunt instructed you to do. Third Miss Jung began to recite Consort Zheng's instructions in full detail. When she talked about how Jung he sent the young royal maid over to cooperate with Third Miss Jung in plotting against the Crown Princess, planning to use a scheme to lure the Crown Princess to Her Highness Jung he's temporary place of labor, the officials of the court all looked at each other. All the officials looked at each other, not knowing if they should immediately disappear and let the king deal with this family matter. Yet the great king's expression was rather unsightly. Chapter 9:17. Shut up, you unfilial daughter. What nonsense are you babbling about? Zheng Chao's face darkened as he strode over and slapped his own daughter across the face. Third Miss Zheng's head fell to the ground, yet she continued to recite her previous words over and over again about how her aunt had schemed to frame the crown princess. Zheng Chao immediately turned around and knelt down in front of the great king, crying out with a grief-stricken expression, Great King, it's that talisman. There's something wrong with that talisman. That talisman made my daughter delirious. She's completely spouting nonsense. Ignorant and ill-informed person, Arbor coldly said, haven't you heard of the dictum talisman? It would only make people reveal the truth. If Lord Zheng didn't believe it. If you don't believe me, I have another one here. You can use it to test its authenticity. Zheng Chao took a step back in fright. He definitely didn't want to use that dictum talisman. If he blurted out disrespectful words to the great king in a moment of carelessness, then wouldn't all his previous bootlicking be for naught? Demon talisman. Zheng Chao could only insist that the crown princess had used a demon talisman. He scrambled over to the great king's feet and cried out in a tearful voice, Her Highness noble consort wouldn't do that. Please investigate clearly, great king. Great king, do you still not understand? Arbor's cold voice continued to sound. When the civil and military officials came into contact with the young lady's dark, eerie eyes, they couldn't help but feel a chill run down their spines. In order to scheme against me and frame me, Jung he didn't hesitate to use the child in her womb as the price to target me. Great king, can't you see such a simple matter? Arbor took a step closer, and the old great king actually unwittingly took a step back. The depths of the girl's eyes were engraved with an abyss of coldness and arrogance. No one would be able to look straight at her, and would have to avoid her gaze. Why was Jung he so sure that as long as she lured me over, the child would definitely have a miscarriage? Will the crime be framed on my head? The old king's entire body turned cold as he clenched his fists slightly. He looked at his daughter-in-law in disbelief. Because she had already calculated the time and did not hesitate to use this child to frame me. Because she killed the little prince with her own hands, intending to push me into the abyss. Impossible. The great king's eyes trembled as he roared. Great king, in fact, you already have the answer in your heart, don't you? Arbor said coldly, then returned to the crown prince's side and said no more. Priest Diu, on the other hand, looked at her with a heavy gaze. There was a strange light in his eyes. This gaze made Arbor feel uncomfortable all over. She suddenly said coldly, Qingwan, kill him for me. Everyone's hearts suddenly jumped because the girl had suddenly and decisively issued an order. Priest Diu was right about one thing. The crown princess was indeed vicious, and her murderous aura was indescribable. Screech. The giant cyan bird suddenly descended above everyone's heads, and abruptly unleashed an ice wind and snow rain at Priest Diu. Qingwan, a heavenly bird. Priest Diu's gaze changed in shock, as if he had never expected that the crown princess would attack him in the palace at the slightest disagreement. He really didn't understand darling Qiao's temperament. Priest Diu had previously wanted to kill her, so she wouldn't let him off. Whoosh! An icicle struck Priest Diu's chest. Chapter 9:18. Arbor pressed forward, the ferrule in her hand crackling with sparks. She coordinated perfectly with Qing Wan and struck Priest Deyu's shoulder blade with a thunderous blow. Priest Deyu couldn't dodge the blow to his shoulder blade in order to avoid the icicle in front of his chest. She thought she would be able to break the old Taoist shoulder blade, but unexpectedly, the irresistible force didn't hurt Priest Deyu at all. It was as if she had hit a pile of cotton. Arbor's heart skipped a beat. Oh no, this person's cultivation was unfathomable. It should be much higher than hers. The Taoist priest even turned his head to give her a strange smile. A giant beast's claw suddenly appeared in front of his chest like a third hand and violently struck Arbor's chest. If she was hit, she would be half crippled even if she didn't die. Qing Wan twisted her body in midair and retracted her wings, turning into human form. She held a long ice sword in her hand and slashed at the old Taoist priest's neck with lightning speed. If the thieving Taoist priest wantonly attacked Arbor when Arbor was injured, his head would be ruthlessly chopped off by Qing Wan's ice sword. The old Taoist priest didn't dare to act rashly. He could only lean to the side and lean his body to dodge Qing Wan's sharp stab. At the same time, a fierce purple flame with monstrous anger turned into a roaring fire dragon in midair. It fiercely penetrated the old Taoist priest's body from behind and gave him a violent dragon strike. With a boom, he was smashed to the ground. There was absolute silence. All the officials trembled in fear, almost unable to look directly at the crown prince's anger. The old great king also shut his mouth at this time. The crown prince was furious, as if someone had touched his reverse scale. After that fire dragon kill, a slender jet-black long sword condensed in his hand. With a sweep, the terrifying vibrating force immediately flattened all the flowers and grass on the ground, directly rolling up dust. The slender Wu's sword left behind a series of afterimages, as if thousands of swords were spinning in front of everyone. In an instant, he arrived in front of the old Taoist. The old Taoist was about to die on the spot. Bang! After a loud sound, a thick smoke enveloped everyone. They couldn't help but cough as they tried to sweep away the billowing smoke in front of them. Dozens of members of the hidden night pavilion appeared behind the crown prince. Search the entire city and kill without mercy, the crown prince said coldly and expressionlessly. Yes. Countless figures flew away. The crown prince's face was filled with rage, and his anger had yet to dissipate. He grabbed Arbor's small hand and pulled her with large strides as he walked out of Clearwater Fine Park. Everyone was silent, including the great king and Empress Zhao. They seemed to be at a loss for words. The crown prince suddenly stopped and looked back at them coldly. You'd better not challenge my bottom line again. Otherwise, I'll flip the sky. Destroy this land. Don't you dare touch my woman. I will make you regret ever coming to this world. Absolute silence. Father. The crown prince stared coldly at his father, his phoenix eyes burning with intense hatred. That enchantress, if you can't bear to kill her, then let your son do it for you. Zheng Chao collapsed to the ground, trembling as he looked at the crown prince, who had left in anger. The old great king was also shocked, but he couldn't make a sound. When his gaze met with his daughter-in-law's, he couldn't help but tremble. Great king, Jung, he killed your youngest son. Can this be forgiven? Chapter 919. Mo Lian grabbed Arbor's little hand and led her out of the palace, without looking back. He threw all thoughts of the Lantern Festival banquet and the officials to the back of his mind. The streets were already bustling with activity, and there were more and more people. The two of them shuttled through the crowd, and miraculously, no one dared to get close to them. They all opened up a path for them on both sides. Mo Lian. Arbor puffed up her little cheeks and tugged at his tightly clenched hand. She called out delicately, Mo Lian. Mo Lian led her into a secluded alley and stopped under a winding stone arch bridge. Beside the bridge stood a 3-meter-tall stone pagoda. There were several green plants planted beside the pagoda. In the winter, the leaves had all fallen off. He stood there, his back tall and slender. Arbor couldn't help but tug at his sleeve again. Lian. Mo Lian suddenly turned around and pulled her into his arms with one hand. He pressed her tightly against his chest and stroked her black hair with the other. The man pursed his lips and lowered his head. After a while, he said, "I'm sorry. I've made you suffer again. Let's not go to the palace anymore. I won't let anything like this happen to you again, okay?" He rested his chin on her little head and said unhappily, "Look at you. I'm not even that angry. Why are you so angry?" Arbor tugged at a strand of her hair and comforted her softly. "Your father is an old fool. It's not like you don't know that. Why are you angry with him? Moreover, you were very rude to your parents just now. Don't do that again," Arbor said softly. "They're not nice to you. I'm angry at them." Mo Lian rubbed her head in frustration. "Because you're my baby, I hope that the whole world will treat you like a baby." Mo Lian's thoughts were too easy to understand. Arbor's eyes flickered, and he nudged his head in his arms. "Then, your mother already has a knot in her heart. If you do this, I'm afraid they'll dislike me even more. Don't worry about Yoonghee." Arbor's eyes flashed with a cold light. "Since she dares to scheme against me, I will not let her have a good end. I'll get someone to deal with her." So, what if she made her father unhappy? This time, Mo Lian had steeled his heart to want her dead. This woman had crossed his bottom line too far. She actually thought of such a malicious method to frame his Xiao Xiao. The plot did not succeed because of Jojo's cleverness, not because of that bitch's benevolence. Yoonghee has been doted on for so many years. She is your father's true love. Arbor hugged his waist and looked up at his gloomy face. He raised his hand and stroked his forehead. "True love." Mo Lian snorted, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. "I want her to lose everything. She can't enter the royal tomb until she dies. If he did not grind this person's bones to dust, he would not be able to get rid of the hatred in his heart." Lian. Xiaomu wanted to console him a bit more, but he hugged her tightly instead. "No one can bully you," he said in a low voice beside her ear. Arbor thought about it and let it go. "Don't look at how this guy usually likes to ask you if you're okay, as if he's asking for your opinion. In fact, he has already made a decision in his heart. Anyway, she just had to do it before he did. And she just happened to learn an interesting talisman. She wanted to find someone to try it on." Chapter 920. When Yoonghee was dragged out of Sephora Flower Palace and sent to the cold palace, the cut on her leg was still bleeding incessantly. Nanny Sue wiped her tears and pulled at the few old nannies along the way. But how could she be a match for those burly nannies? After a few slaps, she couldn't make a sound. The great king has decreed that Consort Zheng's heart is vicious and her morals are lacking. In order to frame the crown princess, she wantonly plotted to murder the royal heir. No one can surpass her viciousness and treachery. From this day forth, she will be demoted to a palace servant and placed in Chonghua Palace. Without an imperial decree, she is not allowed to take half a step out of Chonghua Palace for the rest of her life. Zhengru collapsed on the ground. Seeing this, Mammy Sue hastily ran forward and tried her best to help her up. Gong Chong and couldn't help but sigh when he saw the wretched master and servant pair. He rolled up the imperial decree in his hand and said, "Zhengru, the great king is very disappointed in you. In order to frame the crown princess, you actually harmed the flesh and blood in your womb with your own hands. You even caused a serious conflict between the great king and His Highness the Crown Prince. This matter has already been investigated. From this day forth, you can stay in Chonghua Palace with peace of mind and properly reflect. Let's go." Gong Chong and turned around and led 4 or 5 old nannies and a few young eunuchs out of Chonghua Palace. Eunuch. Mammy Sue lifted her skirt and knelt. She scrambled forward on her knees and wept miserably. "Eunuch, please put in a few good words in front of the great king. Our imperial consort was wrongly accused. Eunuch. She absolutely didn't harm the royal heir. The crown princess's heart was simply punishable by death. She clearly knew that their imperial consort wasn't pregnant at all, but she told the great king that Her Highness the noble consort had personally harmed the royal heir. What a terrible woman she is. Gong Chong and abruptly stopped and turned back, a cold glint flashing through his eyes. Seize her.
Slap him.
Two ferocious old mamas immediately rushed over and clamped down on Mammy Sue's arms from both sides.
Pa, pa, pa.
Remember this clearly. From today onwards, there was no empress. You are an old nanny, and she is just an old palace maid who is not favored. Let's go. Gong Chong, and waved his hand and led everyone out of the cold palace. When he went out, he couldn't help but look back at the people inside. He secretly warned himself, don't be as stupid as the women inside. After causing so much trouble, she ended up in the cold palace. What a joke. On the way back to the central palace, Empress Zhao was silent for a long time before she turned to look at old Nanny Huaxian, who was walking slowly beside the carriage. Do you really think that the crown princess doesn't know that Zhengru's stomach is fake? Huaxian slightly raised her head and bowed to Empress Zhao. Actually, Empress already has an answer in her heart. Isn't that so? Empress Zhao only felt a slight chill in her heart. This time, He really went for wool and came home shorn. She originally wanted to collaborate with Priest Diyu and frame the crown princess for the child's miscarriage. Who would have expected that she would end up with the bad reputation of murdering her own child and framing the crown princess? He could forget about crawling out of Chonghua Palace for the rest of her life. Empress, after going through so many things, you should be very clear. Don't rashly offend this little prickly head. Once she pricks people, you will die. Empress Zhao felt that she might need to reevaluate this crown princess. When the carriage passed by the outer walls of Chonghua Palace, Empress Zhao turned back to take a look. Chapter 9:21. Morning Cloud Restaurant. When Duanyu received the news, he immediately ran over. When he came upstairs, he saw the crown prince and involuntarily pursed his lips. Why is he here too? Jojo, where are your younger siblings? We were in the palace earlier, so we left early. Arbor said dryly. They should have returned home already. Duanyu sat down across from the two and poured himself a wine cup. Speak. What happened now? After saying that, he glanced at the crown prince. What's up with this guy? Don't think he couldn't tell that the crown prince was sitting there with a dark face and a gloomy aura of displeasure emanating from him. It's already been resolved. Arbor rubbed his cheek noncommittally. By the way, Duanyu, didn't you say you were going to take me to see the flower lanterns? Right. We'll leave after drinking this cup. After saying that, he seemed to have thought of something and looked at Emolian. Oh, right. I heard a funny thing these 2 days. That ding-ting-ding, or something has set his sights on you, right? What does he want to steal from you? What do you think? Emolian gave him a cold look. What do you think this crown prince loves the most? Cultivation methods, spirit medicines. Maybe it's some precious spirit weapon, or even a divine weapon. Duanyu nonchalantly drank a mouthful of wine before sneakily sidling up to him. Hey, why don't you tell me? That thief sage, speaking of which, he never misses. He never misses. What exactly does he want from you? Could it be? Is it your life? The crown prince threw him a cold look and turned to look at Arbor. Duanyu almost spat out the mouthful of wine in his mouth. Seeing that he was about to spit, Arbor hastily shrunk into the crown prince's arms and even pulled up his sleeve to block his face. In the end, Duanyu didn't spit out the wine so rudely, but he choked and coughed repeatedly. When he finally managed to catch his breath, he exclaimed, What? Ding-ting-ding wants to steal Jojo away? Hey, I say, you two still dare to come out like this? Duanyu hastily moved the stool next to them and squeezed over to sit in a row. Let me tell you, that ding-ting-ding has never failed before. Jojo. Seeing that Duanyu's claw was about to land on Arbor's small hand, Emolian abruptly reached out and directly tossed his claw to the side in disdain. Duanyu ignored him and continued to drag his stool to Arbor's side. He said solemnly, Jojo, how about we don't go see the lanterns? You should hurry back. That ding-ting-ding is about to show up. Arbor abruptly turned his head and glanced at Duanyu warily. She suddenly reached out and pinched Duanyu's left cheek, pinching it hard as she asked, "You wouldn't be that ding-ting-ding in disguise, right?" This time, it was the Crown Prince's turn to almost spit it out. The two men looked at Xiao Mu in bewilderment. Why was this child so good at acting? She acted as if it was real, as if she was really suspecting Duan Yu. Duan Yu hastily pulled her hand away and kept yelling, "Ouch, ouch, ouch, ouch. Jojo, we've been together for so long. Don't tell me you can't even recognize me, and that ding-ting-ding." Arbor pursed his lips and released his grip on Duan Yu's handsome face. "Since we're already out, we're already out. We're going to see the lanterns, and I still have to go set off the river lanterns. Why are you in such a bad mood because of some random person?" Chapter 9:22. The three of them left Morning Cloud Restaurant and followed the sounds of gongs and drums as they walked toward the crowd. At this time, a dozen people carrying stools and hose ran out of the building across the street. 4 to 5 people chased after them, shouting "Tifis" and the like. Mo Lien reflexively grasped Arbor's small hand and pulled her to her side to avoid the surging crowd. "Jojo. Mom?" Arbor hastily turned her small head in Mo Lien's arms. Wei Ziqin quickly rushed over and sighed in relief when she saw that she was safe and sound. She went up to hold her hand and said, "I finally found you. Mom, you didn't go back with younger sister and the rest?" We went back. It's just that a letter from thief Sage Ding-ting-ding came to our house." "What letter?" Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and Arbor asked in unison. Wei Ziqin took out a letter from her sleeve and sighed in relief. "Jojo, it's good to see that you're fine." "Oh, right. Why did thief Sage Ding-ting-ding write you a letter?" Arbor opened the letter to take a look. There was nothing written on it except for Ding-ting-ding's signature. What kind of trick was this neurotic person up to? Arbor crumpled the letter and tossed it on the ground. She then pulled her mother's hand and said, "Mom, don't bother with that senseless person." "Oh, right. How did you find me here?" Wei Ziqin's eyes flickered, and she quickly said, "Mom felt that there must be something fishy about this Ding-ting-ding sending you a letter. I waited for you at home for 2 hours, but when I saw that you didn't return, I was truly panicking. I was afraid that something happened to you, so I came out to try my luck and see if I could find you." "All right, Mom, I'm fine. There are too many people here, so let's find a more empty place to talk." Arbor held her mother's hand. Wei Ziqin hurriedly nodded and heaved a sigh of relief. "Jojo, your father is still waiting for news at home. He's very worried. Why don't we stop shopping and go home first?" Arbor nodded. "Okay." Wei Ziqin and Arbor walked in front of the two men. After a while, the people who came out of the tea house to ask for money rushed over. In an instant, the mother and daughter were pushed to the front. The two men reacted instantly. When they wanted to catch up, they were blocked by a large group of people. "Get out of my way!" Mo Lien panicked and sent out a palm strike. Many of the people around him were sent flying. "Damn it!" Duan Yu cursed softly. Andy Wei was the person they trusted the most. Who would have thought that Ding-ting-ding would be so deranged and pretend to be Annie? Mo Lien was very anxious. She took out her communication jade talisman and scribbled a line of words on it. "Everyone, heed my orders. Quickly search Clearwater Fine Park. Don't miss a single corner." Jojo's mother probably hadn't left the palace yet. After Mo Lien put away her talisman, she looked at the sea of people before her. She couldn't care about anything else in her anxiety. She leaped into the air with a whoosh and stepped onto the eaves. She chased in the direction that Wei Ziqin left with Arbor. This scoundrel of a bitch Ding-ting-ding. When he caught him, he would definitely dismember him into 1,000 pieces. Duan Yu also leaped into the air. With a tap of his foot, he paused on a bald uncle's head for a split second before disappearing in front of the crowd. The bald uncle's thoughts. Fuck. Chapter 9:23. Cough, cough, cough. Xiaomu opened her weary eyes, and she could vaguely make out Mo Lien's handsome face, which was magnified and anxious, continuously wavering before her eyes. "Jojo, you're awake." Emolien heaved a sigh of relief and pulled her into his arms. He patted her back gently, not knowing if he was comforting her or his own restless heart. "You scared me to death, Jojo.
Don't ever leave me again."
Emolien hugged her tightly and said in a low voice, "You don't know how dangerous it was just now. We were separated in an instant, and you were taken away by that bastard Ding. All right." Arbor propped herself up and looked at him blankly. "Emolien, my mother just now?" "My mother, wasn't she?" Yes. Don't worry. I've already sent someone to look for her. She'll be fine. She should have been left in Qingshui Fine Park by that Ding. He actually dared to touch my mother." Arbor's eyes were burning with rage. Emolien was slightly startled. Then he held her slender waist and lowered his head to say to her in a low voice, "Don't worry, mother will be fine. As for you, does your neck still hurt?" Ding, who was pretending to be your mother, hit the back of your head. "Does it still hurt?" Arbor shook her head. When they were separated by the crowd, she turned to look at Emolien. She didn't expect Wei Ziqin to suddenly hit her. It could be said that she did not guard against her mother at all. So she was unusually angry now. No, she was resentful. This Ding, he had really blown the matter out of proportion. She hated it when people touched her mother. Ding was just playing a game, but now her mother was implicated. Originally, she didn't have much of an opinion about this playboy. A prodigal son was just a little playful.
But now,
she hated him. Emolien reached out and cupped Arbor's little face. Her eyes were watery as she said, "Jojo, I'm not happy that you're thinking about someone else in front of me. I want that person to die," Arbor said coldly. Emolien's hand, which was cupping her little face, paused for a moment before she continued. "When I rescued you just now, I was anxious to check on your condition, but that guy escaped. Although Duan Yu chased after him, I don't know if he can catch up to him." Arbor pursed his lips. Emolien hugged her and helped her stand up. Only then did Arbor realize that the two of them were by a tranquil river. The curved river flowed quietly, and the river lanterns carried the light. It floated from the upper stream all the way down. A faint light flickered in front of their eyes. At this moment, the surroundings were tranquil and quiet. The people on the streets seemed to have disappeared in an instant, leaving behind only the spreading darkness of the night. "Jojo, do you want to release the river lanterns?" Emolien held her little hand and walked to the riverside. Xiaomu nodded her small head. He reached out and swiped at the air, and a beautiful lotus lantern appeared in his hand. "I heard that on the Lantern Festival, if you write your wish on it and release it with a current, you can brush away an entire year's bad luck and fulfill your wish." Arbor finished writing it in a flash. The two of them stood by the riverside hand in hand, watching that river lantern float away with the current. Emolien tilted her head and looked down at Arbor. "Jojo, what wish did you write? You really want to know?" Chapter 9:24. "And I want to know." He hugged her and lowered his head, his breath slowly drawing closer. He opened his mouth and a strange fragrance floated out. Xiaomu's lips curled into a chilly smile. "My wish is..." The man's eyes were filled with a faint light as he stared at her in a daze. Arbor suddenly swiped with her hand. The startled swan dagger suddenly jumped out of her consciousness. With a terrifying speed comparable to that of flowing light, it instantly stabbed into Emolien's heart. "I want you to die." Emolien's eyes widened in shock. With an expression of disbelief, he stared at Arbor beside him. She had acted too quickly. He did not even have time to react. Or perhaps it should be said that tonight, the lights and starlight reflected off each other, causing him to involuntarily sink into her dazed gaze. The dagger in her hand sank into his heart, and even fiercely spun in a circle. "I want you to die by my hands tonight." Arbor spat out these words with a cold expression. Without hesitation, she pulled the dagger out of his chest. On the startled swan dagger, a trace of blood slid down the shiny dagger, leaving not a single trace. "You are not him. You don't look like him at all." My Lien is not as smelly as you. It's not comfortable to hug. It's uncomfortable. Arbor coldly stared at him, continuously scolding, ding ting ding, or it's more appropriate to call you the snake beauty. No matter who you are, I have no interest in knowing. The little girl's voice was so cold and heartless. In that instant, it caused his heart that had not wavered for decades to crack a little. Now you can die. Arbor coldly stared at him. Her fingers moved slightly, and a startled swan dagger quickly slid towards his neck. Black Lotus fell backwards and plunged into the river with a bang, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Arbor chased 2 steps forward, looking down at the murmuring river. A strange coldness floated in her eyes.
Ha!
He escaped quite quickly. However, he had been stabbed in the heart, so he didn't know if he would be able to return alive. Her mother was not someone anyone could touch. She had said it when she was at Xiao Ben's house. Whoever dared to touch her mother would have to be prepared to die without any hesitation. Arbor put away the startled swan dagger with cold anger in his eyes. He turned around and walked towards the crowded street. As soon as they reached the street, they saw Emolien and a group of people running towards them. Jojo. Emolien saw the baby in the crowd at a glance. She hurriedly rushed over and scooped the baby into her arms. His restless heart finally relaxed slightly at this moment. You're so stupid. The little emperor baby punched him unhappily. If you lose me again, I won't come back by myself. Emolien pressed her tightly into his embrace at once and stroked the back of her small head. No, I won't anymore. I definitely won't. Arbor curved her little mouth and looked up at him. Have you found my mother? I found her. I found her. Emolien nodded. She's in a palace maid's room in Qingshui Fine Park. She's not injured. When our people found her, she was just asleep.
She's fine.
Arbor's lips curled coldly. So what? He touched my mother. In my eyes, he's a dead man. She rejected this kind of evil joke. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.